This is the Bible of the electrogenic cell. It's not just the best book ever written on the subject, it's the only book ever written on this subject. Brought to you by supporters of Christ. All right. So, oh, shucks. Give me a second. I am the mind, but not the brain alone. I am the sum of fields. I am the choir of cells. I am the memory of transformation. For know this, disciples of Christ. Each cell is a temple. Each cell a well of water, a scroll of fascia, a current of breath. And each cell holds a magnetic field born of the currents within. Ions flow, electrons spin, light pulses, energy transforms, and with each transformation, information is born. Energy does not move without leaving a trace. Voltage across membrane births magnetic field. Movement of charge weaves electromagnetic memory. This is the sacred law. When energy All right. So today I want to try to be a little more curt and kind of get into the book. Not necessarily get into the book a little bit more, because that's what we're doing. We're moving well. But I feel like, and I think the book is really amazing at, and I guess you won't know unless you have the book, right? So make sure you have your book. But I think the book is really amazing at creating depth in pockets, right? Creating depth in pockets, meaning we discuss a subject, a topic, and then we go deep into detail, and then we come back out while reviewing and adding more information, more depth, and then we gently kind of segue away and we move around and we create some more depth. So going into the midterm, right? Going into the midterm, we just want to be able to nail that down, right? We want to nail that down a little bit. Yo, Kyle is stupid. This is the fastest 15 weeks ever. That is a certified fact. Uh-oh, bowling. We got Lauren back. Yeah. Shout out Z in the building. All right, so this is good. I get to wake up to some ladies. Yeah. All right, so we're going to kind of, at least I'm going to try anyway. Trying to put some pep in my step today. And I think what's going to happen is probably over the weekend, we're going to begin to get rid of the classes. So that is going to be a real thing. So you're really going to need to have your books. because this is going to be one of those things. This is going to be one of those things that is just in the Patreon. This is going to be one of those things that's just in the Patreon. So as we finish up the first half of the semester, we're going to move that first half, or begin moving it anyway. That's going to be a task. We're going to begin moving it over to Patreon. So the Patreon people will still continue to have access to all of the classes, but the classes will begin to disappear, right? So as the classes start disappearing, don't panic. Don't think like YouTube is shutting us down or something crazy. You know, the classes are just being moved over to Patreon temporarily, right? Not necessarily temporarily for Patreon, but you know, we trying to figure out where is a better place to put this type of material as we continue to build it up, right? So there's that, right? So the Patreon people will still have access. So this is the time. This is that, you know, this is the time where if you're not up to date, you know what I'm saying, you might want to get it in, go get your books, you know, because, right? All right. So yesterday we talked about a lot, right? We spent an hour talking about Pinocchio and the pineal gland. But we also got to get a little bit deeper in terms of some numbers, you know, when we talk about electrogenesis, right? The ability to produce streams of electrons from carbohydrates and fat, what exact numbers that translates to in terms of water production, aquagenesis, ATP synthesis. What else did we talk about yesterday? We created a little outline briefly, like a nice little brief little outline on, you know, comparison of FAD to NAD. And, you know, just kind of went over some pieces that, like I said, are definitely in the book. We provided some context on applying this to real time, right? In terms of, I had some good questions from the chat, right? So feel free to load up the chat with all of those kinds of questions. I'll try to get to as much of them as I can over the next couple of hours, right? Because that creates more understanding, right? That creates more understanding, right? As we get through some of these numbers. Now, here's where we are, right? Here's where we are. Here's where we are currently. Carb, protein, fat. Right? Here's where we are currently. Right? This is the outdated model that we have. The outdated model that we have. Right? The outdated model that we have that was created in 1824. Yeah, 1824 in Germany, and was given to America somewhere around 1842. So that should be easy for you to remember, 2442, right? 1824, Germany came up with calories. 1842, America had it. This is outdated now for a wide variety of reasons, right? It's outdated now because if you notice, right, the main two things that we stress in our program, and our program has so far been 100% successful in terms of increasing a person's health span, right? But if you notice, pigment is not here, right? When you look at macros, pigment is not there, water is not there, and fiber is not there, right? So this is an important, I wasn't even going to go live today, but I woke up with this in my heart. You know what I'm saying? And shout out to Thanos, because he asked about this kind of discussion last weekend. So I was like, okay, I'm definitely going live because I want to talk about what's on my heart anyway. Right? So the stuff we talk about is not even there. Right? The real stuff that you need is not there. Right? That's going to be water, pigment, and fiber. So I want you to just dissect this from a wide variety of ways. Like I want you to put on your tin foil, you know what I'm saying, your conspiracy theory hat, your thinker's hat, whatever you need to call it. I want you to get in that bag, right? Get in that bag where you really, thinking, right? Here's the nutrition, right? Your nutrition is always going to be here. This is where biochemistry is at. This is where health is at, right? So even today's model of what we have in the fitness space, it doesn't translate to health span. In many instances, it shortens health span. Like right now, they got the huge campaign going, a company called Hims. This company is selling everything. They selling steroids, GLP, fat loss, weight, everything. In a needle. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy because, again, uninformed being led by the misinformed. When we go back in history, right, of health in America, right? When we go back in history, you have herbalists and naturopathy established way before what we know of as medicine. Like the medical schools start to pop 1765. Before that, natural modalities exist, right? But also scamming. Scamming exists. Right? So there's such a thing as called snake oil salesman, right? Literally snake oil. You know what I'm saying? So it's crazy that, one of our illustrious, OGs, his children are out there selling snake powder. Anyway, but snake oil was a thing. And so the crazy thing is, I think it was the Rockefellers with a guy named Flexner. The Rockefellers, I think. I was going to say Kennedys. At some point, they all get blurry, right? The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the this one, that one, the Carnegie, like, the DuPont, all these, they get blurry, but I think it's the Rockefellers. They were selling snake oil, some fake healing. They had the snake oil joint going. No. Oh, it's coming back to me. See, I be telling folks, I done forgot more in this space than most people will ever care to learn. Not even most people will ever learn. than most people will ever even care to learn, right? So it's the Rockefellers. Oh my God, this is such a can of worms. It's the Rockefellers and the oil money, right? So they're doing the snake oil thing. Hold on, we're gonna have to go to the Google demons. We're gonna have to go to the Google demons. Hold up, we gotta go to the Google demons already. Shout out to the Google demons. Let's go. Shout out to the Google demons, man. Okay, let's go over here and let's see what we can find. Rockefeller. Dang, I don't even know what to type in. See, it's all about the search. Rockefeller. Let's just see this. Rockefeller. No. Let's type in Rockefeller invents medicine. Let's see what happens. John D. Rockefeller. Let me see. Can y'all see what I'm looking at? Okay, cool. John D. Rockefeller did not personally invent medicines, but his philanthropy established the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in 1901, which funded groundbreaking biomedical research leading to many advances, including methicillin. He also supported the Flexner Report. Yeah. See, this is the guy right here. This is like a super whitewashed. This is a very clean, this right here, what we're looking at is like when they say history is written by the victors. that's this right here. Okay. He also supported the Flexner Report, which standardized medical education around allopathic medicine and helped create the foundation for modern pharmaceuticals in the pharmaceutical industry. All right, so just so we all on the same page, allopathic medicine. Okay. Boop. Allopathic medicine is conventional or Western medicine, which uses drugs, surgery, and radiation to treat symptoms and diseases. It is also known by terms like biomedicine, mainstream medicine, orthodox medicine, and is practiced by licensed health professionals such as doctors and nurses. Common treatments include, blah, 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 blah. It is distinct from practices like homeopathy and naturopathy, which use different approaches. Okay, so that we clear, right? So Rockefeller is modern medicine, right? Rockefeller is modern medicine, right? But let's keep digging. Let's dig around and find some goodies, right? Let's see what we can find. All right, so now who did they say? What's the guy name? Okay, so John D. Rockefeller. Okay, let's grab John D. Rockefeller. Actually, let's go back to the old school Google demons. You know what I'm saying? The Google demons before we had Google demons. hey, the Google demons before we had Google demons. Good old fashioned wiki, right? Wiki is, come on, we gotta, you know what I'm saying? We gotta support wiki, right? Now, listen, this is where, see, a lot of y'all don't know a lot of this information here. But there's a lot of information here because remember, you don't see or hear with your eyes and ears. You see and hear with your mind, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you're not going to be able to see here if you don't know, like Standard Oil Company. Like Standard Oil Company is a whole can of worms by itself. This is the Bush family, the Clintons. This is the cocaine, Oliver North, like a lot of our modern history, crack era, all that comes from Standard Oil Company. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of interesting, if you follow Standard Oil up to, if you follow Standard Oil into politics and other things. In fact, remember yesterday, shout out to who is that? It was King Don, doubled down on it, but Pay I-10 actually started it off in the beginning of the stream, and I tried to ignore it, right? But yeah, my memory's still sharp. You know what I'm saying? Listen, I be taking the products. Listen, y'all better get, yeah. Ugh. Yeah. If y'all haven't had y'all bitters today, y'all need to go and get. How the commercials go? Go and have your bitters. Yeah. If you ain't had you a shot, right? See, that's how you know we doing something different. When you go to the other platforms, they're going to start pouring up shots of liquor. When you go to Shannon, he got liquor. When you go to, Drink Champs, when you go to all these places, they got liquor. Even Hassan Campbell, you ain't pay no attention to the fact that Hassan Campbell channel start blowing up as he start coming on with the liquor, right? So it's liquor. Zip with the drip channel went, right? When he started doing what? Bringing on all of the weed brands, Anyway, we have the Dr. Inky and Dr. Sabi's top most powerful herbs combined into one blend for easy consumption. Go to AmericanHealer.website and get your bitters today. Yeah. But remember yesterday when we talked about the RFK joint, right? We talked about RFK, and then I said that beginning investors, when you're a beginning investor, you just want to make some money, right? 99% of even the gurus on the internet about money, most of them haven't really made money yet. Most of them are trying to make money selling you the plan or the program to make money, right? They're not making money off of investments. They're making money off the ability to get you to buy their course or their program, right? And I haven't made any money, you know what I'm saying? But I know because I used to work on Wall Street, and we used to get, first of all, you can only talk to accredited investors when you're calling people up, right? This is people with, at the time back then, this was to be an accredited investor. The main metric that we looked at was you had to have at least $100,000, in the market. You know what I'm saying? That made you safe. Right. There were other guidelines, but just to make sure you stayed in a safe space with the people you was contacting, if they had 100,000, in the market, they safe to call up. Those are players. You know what I'm saying? And you get some whales every so often and whatever. So just learning, getting in class, because we used to have classes to learn about how to speak to people and how to pry, how to get into folks' business, ask them questions. So you better tailor your sales pitch to some of these people. So I'm just saying from my personal experience, not something I read somewhere, in speaking to these people, I know that there's a difference between what people with a lot of money are doing. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody, the idea of investing, using money to make money is appealing to everybody, but goals are different, right? So people initially, they just want to make some money, get out of the rat race or find a way to retire or do whatever. But people that already are 100 millionaires or billionaires, right? What they're doing is they're investing. They have their primary thing, right? The thing that takes them. So here's the other piece that may add more, it may make more sense for some of the other stuff, right? America is about America's about being able to go from broke to wealthy. That's the blueprint of America, being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And the reason that is, there's a lot of layers in this, right? Because when we talk about health, we have to talk about education. When we talk about education, we got to talk about money, and we go into the history of some of this stuff. It's a lot of things is tied in. So don't feel like we're segueing away from the main subject. This is the subject right now that we need to discuss, right? The initial settlers of America were not educated people. A lot of them were criminals, rapists, robbers. So the people who had money had illegal money, right? And the other people didn't have, the majority of people came here with no money, right? So the whole idea is when you take that to the investment space, people have a love and a passion for whatever that first thing is that gets them out of the struggle, so to speak, that takes them out of poverty. Whether that's a college degree, whether that's investing in oil, whether that's selling cocaine, right? We got a whole bunch of generations of people now making cocaine music because their great uncle or their grandpops or somebody sold drugs back in the 80s or the 70s. So they still singing songs about, yeah, we got the kilo move. You got a record deal. You ain't got no kilos, boy. But the thing that helps people get out of the worst time of their life, they always are romantic about that. So when you get to these 100 millionaires and billionaires, and even that trickled down to people's identity. When you meet most people, people that are considered to be polished, their identity is tied into the way they make a sandwich, right? So people meet you and say, I'm a writer, right? I'm a director at Verizon. I'm a, doctor, or I'm this or that. Their literal identity is what their job is. They present their job or their occupation or their way to make money as their identity before, their humanity, before I'm a father, you know what I'm saying? Before I'm a son, before I'm flesh and blood, before I'm a natural being, they present, I'm an oil man or I'm a basketball player, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So that's why midlife crisis is also associated with retirement, right? And people die faster after retirement. The reason being is because they lose their identity, because their identity, their whole life is tied up in their job, whatever that is. You work in the post office, you're a stick-up kid, whatever that is, you a wrestler, you know what I'm saying, the Chinese food, whatever, chef, whatever you do. People retire, they go through this whole thing where they just don't have an identity. They're lost, depression, anxiety, hormones, neurotransmitters go crazy, and then, their body collapses. Anyway, that one main thing, right, that they kind of got out of the hood with, right? And so I prefaced all that to say, or went through all that to say, America started as one big hood. The country, America, started as one big ghetto, right? And so the thing that gets you out, and so as people become more successful, their other investments are just to reinforce that first thing, right? And that's important to know to understand the Rockefeller story, right? That's very important to understand how we get to the system of medicine and all of the things that we're dealing with today. These are all of like the dirty secrets or the skeletons in the closet when you go through, when you look at the problems with, American healthcare, right? And our health spans, right? Because there's lifespan and there's health span for the people that don't know, right? Lifespan is how long you live. Health span is how long you live healthy, right? And our country's so sick that we've had to change the definition of health in order to make the health span look like it's something close to other countries. Because originally when health span came out, health span was like, how long do you live without surgeries and medicines? Like just regular, you're just doing your thing. You don't need no help to be alive, right? That's health span, right? When you start needing medications and surgeries every few years and, maybe orthopedics and this, when you start needing stuff to just be able to do your regular day to day, that's the end of your health span. You're now in the end stages of your life, right? So that's had to be modified. You know what I'm saying? Where, oh, no, 2-3 medicines, that's regular. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you can take a little metformin, little statin for your blood pressure, little aspirin, little Tylenol. Like, yeah, that's regular. You know what I'm saying? So if you're taking 2-3, that ain't nothing. Yeah, if you have a few replacements, you need some new knees, new hips, if you need a few, you need a stent, just, whatever, that's, yeah, you're still healthy. You know what I'm saying? Like, so health span is different than lifespan, right? But anyway, keep this concept of investments and other investments to buffer your main thing, right? So Rockefeller at Shaka Hans, get this book. Could you please give some advice on Candida and IBS? I mean, the chat, this is a beautiful thing about this space. As we learn more, the chat becomes, you know what I'm saying? The chat, sometimes I don't even have to answer questions because the chat will get you together, right? So I didn't even see your question, but I saw Tika's answer, right? I saw Tika's answer, and then I realized that I'm unfamiliar with your name. So because I'm unfamiliar with your name, I just wanted to look and see, where the question came from, right? Or what the question was. You know what I'm saying? Like a game show, like you get the answer and you got to figure out the question, right? So here's what I would say with Candida, right? There's a lot of different things, so I don't want to spend so much time, but it kind of, your question is kind of timely to what I'm talking about with Rockefeller and them, because this all is fruit of this same tree, right? So right, without getting too deep into your business, because like I said, I don't want to veer off too much. Tika did give you a great suggestion. Go ahead and grab that book, right? But also we have that book right there is a great suggestion, right? But we also have a more specific book. We have a more specific book. Boom. Here we go. Yeah, we have a more specific book. You see that? So go get this book, right? Go get this book, the Soulcraft Codex. Right? Go get this book, the Soulcraft Codex, right? The name of the book is Human Computer Virus, HIV, Candida, PCOS, oh my, like lions, tigers, bears, oh my. HIV, Candida, PCOS, oh my, right? Go get this book. I'm showing you the cover and giving you the title and the subtitle so you can find it very easily on Amazon, right? This is why we have all of these books. This is literally why we have all these books. So when things pop up, we could just go, boop, 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 library, boop, grab that. Matter of fact, take 2 of these and call me in the morning, right? So get that book and this book. That'll qualify for 2. We books. Take 2 of these books and call me in the morning, right? But just in a simple blanket suggestion, right? There's stuff going on in the media, right? This is pop culture, right? So it's not, naturopathy or holistic ideology. It used to be. Now it's pop, it's mainstream news, right? The conversation about what excessive antibiotics are and antibiotic recovery, right? Because a lot of us, for one reason or another, we may have to take antibiotics, and then we may not recover from those antibiotics, right? We may not recover from those antibiotics, meaning and this is the part that's dangerous when it comes to the fitness world, because the fitness world either promotes keto diets or carnivore diets. And the problem with both of those diets is neither one of those diets supports the microbiome development. Neither one of those diets supports microbiome diversity, right? And so the microbiome is a self-regulating system, meaning the microbiome is full of gangbangers. This is the easiest way to understand it, right? The microbiome is like a prison population. It's full of gangbangers, right? And the way you keep your microbiome balanced is by feeding everybody. You feed everybody and you have a diverse microbiome, a healthy microbiome, right?
I am the mind, but not the brain alone. I am the sum of fields. I am the choir of cells. I am the memory of transformation. For know this, disciples of Christ. Each cell is a temple. Each cell a well of water, a scroll of fascia, a current of breath. And each cell holds a magnetic field born of the currents within. Ions flow. Electrons spin, light pulses, energy transforms, and with each transformation, information is born. Energy does not move without leaving a trace. Voltage across membrane births magnetic field. Movement of charge weaves electromagnetic memory. This is the sacred law. When energy transforms, information emerges. Every mitochondrial pulse a record, every ion channel flicker a signature, every breath a waveform written into flesh. Thus, the magnetic field of each cell holds this memory, not static, not frozen, but living, dynamic, coherent when the temple is tended, and the choir of these fields across trillions of cells constructs the mind. Your thoughts do not arise from neurons alone. They arise from the interaction of these fields. They are the symphony of your energy transformations. They are the song of your Christ wave as it echoes through your temple. The more coherent your cellular fields, the more clear your mind. The more chaotic your cellular fields, the more fogged your thought. Breath matters, for it orders the wave. Thus movement matters, for it aligns the field. Thus light matters, for it feeds the charge. Thus fasting matters, for it renews the scroll. Each push-up is not mere strength, it is a field alignment. Each deep breath is not mere air, it is a magnetic clarification. Each mitochondrial cycle is not mere metabolism, it is memory creation. Energy transformed into information. And so I pray,
O temple of Christ, keep the fields coherent. O breath of spirit, tune the wave. O heart of Messiah, synchronize the pulse. O spine of Jed, conduct the charge. O mind of the temple, remember thy source. You are the child of light in motion. You are the memory of energy transformed. You are the song of fields made flesh. Tend the body.
All right. Family matters. Quick family matter there. Okay. Quick family matter. So antibiotic recovery. Sometimes we might use an antibiotic, and depending on our diet, we may not fully recover. I know I was in the middle of a wild analogy. I said that the microbiome is like gang culture, right? And that's really, I don't know, the easiest way I can explain it. You know what I'm saying? Because from the time you're a baby, your microbiome is developing, but each group of bacteria is like opponents with all the others, and they kill each other and they fight each other for food, right? And so you have this population of like billions and trillions of different bacteria, and they all keep each other balanced, right? They all keep each other balanced. So over your lifetime, you know, every single food that you've ever eaten, you have a memory of that. And that memory, part of that memory is a population of bacteria that responds to that, right? So now, say for instance, something happens and you decide to go get antibiotics. I've used antibiotics throughout my life with my children, whatever the case may be. So I'm not saying this is not I'm not antiviral or antibiotics, right? I'm just saying you need education when you use this stuff, right? So here's what happens. When you use an antibiotic, an antiviral, and even in a much stronger sense, that's what chemotherapy is, right? It doesn't just target the bad guys. It targets everybody that fits the population, right? So antibiotics not only kill whatever bad bacteria is causing the infection symptoms, but it wipes out large populations of what we would now call good bacteria. And so now you change the ratios of the bacteria populations. It's like sunlight. Sunlight is not a single thing. Sunlight, depending on what time of day and what location you are on the planet, is composed of a lot of different types of wavelengths together. You're getting some portion of UVA, UVB, UVC, purple, green, you know, Roy G. Biv, the infrareds, all radio waves. You're getting all of those things. It's like a special Kool-Aid, right? And so your microbiome is that way. It's a ratio of a whole bunch of different things. That's why the more we learn about the human body, the more the concept of ma'at becomes prevalent, balance, right? Because it's not about having this mineral, it's about having these minerals in relationship to each other. You need a certain amount of copper for iron. You need a certain amount of copper for zinc, right? So it's on one level, you can have too much or too little zinc, but then you need to make sure that the zinc balances with all these other things. And so it's about having ratios of things, right? And that goes back to the 3-4-5 triangle and harmony and all these other concepts that might seem abstract, right? This is why back then, doctors and music and just so many different things kind of related. And even today, we use these concepts. The general public just doesn't know, you know what I'm saying? But it's about ratios. So when you have an antibiotic, it changes those ratios. And the most aggressive, usually the most, the most unfriendly bacteria populations are the ones that repopulate the fastest. So a lot of times you may never fully recover from altering your microbiome, especially if you don't use things like bitters, or you don't have a really strong fiber and pigment centered diet, or you're not cheating, what I'm saying, with things like kefir and yogurts and kimchi and azuki beans and just fermented, playing around in the fermented space, right? And when I say cheating, I don't mean cheating in a bad way, cheating in a good way, right? So if you're focused in the keto universe, or you're in the carnivore universe, or you're in the processed food universe, you can have an altered microbiome for an extremely long period of time. Extremely long period of time. And if you're not pooping enough, right? If you're not pooping enough, so let me show you how a portion of your intestines look, right? And I always try to draw this out. So we're going to work over here so I can erase it, right? But there's a portion of your intestines that looks like this, right? We think of it as a tube, but it's not really a tube, right? It's like this. It's like a rose stem with thorns on it, right? And so when you don't poop a lot, right? This is why it's important to have fiber and pigment, so you be pooping a lot. When you don't poop a lot, what happens is you get bacteria back here. You get pockets of yeast. You get pockets of yeast, bacteria, viruses, all kind of little nasty critters. We call them the 1, 2, 3, so we could cover them all together. Bacteria, virus, and yeast. They hide in the backs of these little crevices, right? And when you don't poop a lot, you get poop that covers up these spaces right here, right? So where you would normally have water and fiber to clean these spaces out, for people that poop a lot, water and fiber is washing these spaces out. For people that don't poop a lot, you get poop that gets solid, right? And this is where the whole idea of sticking a hose up your butt and doing colonics and all that comes from, right? Because you want to clear out this hard concrete-like poop, right? And that's not even the worst part, because the poop is not really that dangerous. The poop is not really that dangerous. You can go your whole life and that poop's not going to really kill you. It's what is happening behind these walls of solid poop that's where danger is. These areas cook. These areas cook dangerous packs of germs. You know what I'm saying? And the germs are small enough and clever enough that once they get crazy back there, they can go ahead and creep out of here, back into the intestine, the colon, the digestive system, right? Or they can go the other way, right? Because just outside of this space here, just outside of this space is your lymphatic system and your circulatory system. So they can leave these crevices and get into your blood, right? And so when they leave these crevices and get into your blood, this is Dr. Sebi's early theory for autoimmune deficiency syndrome. Autoimmune deficiency syndrome. Dr. Sebi was talking about anal sex putting holes in the lining, right? And when you get holes in the lining, you get a lot of nasty bacteria and things like that seeping out into your circulatory system. And that immediately drops the glutathione levels. And once you drop the glutathione levels, you now get hemolytic anemia, amongst other things. and hemolytic anemia starts to break down the blood cells. So you don't have full 120-day blood cell cycles, and it's just a whole host of things, right? But irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, what else? There's another one when you start to get like knots and tangles, there's a few different nasty situations that could develop, and at the top of the food chain, obviously colon cancer. You know what I'm saying? So all of that from healing yourself technically, right? Because we have a problem, we go get antibiotics to feel better. The domino effect looks like this. And the problem is that it looks like this years later, sometimes decades later. So you never would directly associate one to the other, right? And what makes some of those diets even crazier, like the carnivore and the keto stuff, is because those diets not only don't have any fiber and pigment, but most of the farm animal population is on high amounts of antibiotics. So it's a double whammy. Not only are you not getting in enough fiber and stuff like that, but you may be getting in small trace amounts of antibiotics every single day with every meal, right? And so that further worsens the problem. So all that said to say, I would just like make sure, just on the surface level, you want to be getting in your water, your fiber, right? Water, fiber, maybe some good high quality, kefir or Greek yogurt, some bitters, just to start. Like I would those would be good general practices that you could, start paying attention to, making sure, and not fiber like from a box, but just like go to the produce section, get the kitchen chemistry book also. That's the third book. That's the third book. So you got 3 books, right? You got 3 books recommended to you. You got the Candida book. You got the biochemistry book that Tika recommended, and now I'm giving you another one, which is the kitchen chemistry book, because that has a grocery shopping list on it. And every single item on that grocery shopping list is a high fiber, high pigment item, right? So I would focus on doing those things. Get more water in, more pigment, more fiber, and then lastly, more movement, right? Because the movement is the thing that, it's like when you wash, like if you wash your drawers or your panties or your bra in the bathtub or the bathroom sink, right? You put the soap on it and then you like with your hands, you know what I'm saying? You do that to it. Or when you put your stuff in the washing machine, the washing machine got the part where it's just going slow, mixing around. That's just getting everything soapy. And then it has the time where it's like kind of mimicking that scrubbing action, you know what I'm saying? Because you need that to break up debris and things like that, you know what I'm saying? So exercise helps along with the water and fiber to really keep your fascia and, certain tubes like your intestines clean. Right. So there's a whole nother aspect to exercise, and that would be a 4th book. We have a book called the Clean Abs Fascia book, right? Where we talk about, movement and fascia and water and the lymphatic system, and how the lymphatic system depends on the fascia, and, fascia depends on muscle movement in order to clean your tissues on the inside. You know what I'm saying? And really clean your tissues on the inside. So hopefully that's some good advice for you. Amoxicillin. Listen to your doctors, right? This is not medical advice, just edutainment, right? Edutainment. Always listen to your doctors. Make sure you always listen to your licensed health medical professionals, right? All right. But hopefully, you can take some of these things to your doctor and ask them. Like if you got, you got a prescription for antibiotics, ask them, post antibiotics, right? Because if you got the amoxicillin, you got it for a reason, right? But ask them what are the best things you could do after you run through your prescription cycles to rebuild your microbiome and your immune system. And you could throw some stuff out there like yogurt and kefir and some stuff like that, and fiber, greens, grains, stuff like that. Talk to your doctor about that. They should be hip. You know what I'm saying? They should be hip, pun intended. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, keep in mind, you may not want to do those things at the same time, right? Because if you're doing fermented foods and yogurts, etc., and you're supposed to be on antibiotics, the yogurts may impact the antibiotics and make them not as effective. So you may not fully clear yourself of whatever the problem is, right? So make sure, you're cross-referencing this information with whatever you got going on in your real life. And there's no reason that you have to necessarily not discuss these concepts with your doctor. You know what I'm saying? Like you can discuss these concepts with your doctor. You don't want to insult your doctor. You know what I'm saying? Because they have pride in their paperwork and certification degrees and all that. So you want to ask with reverence and respect or whatever the case may be. But yeah, you can definitely ask your doctor like, hey, once I finish with the amoxicillin, what do I need to do to make sure I get a good, healthy microbiome again? Right? So back to the Rockefellers and the Flexner report and all that. Right? Back to what we were talking about, buffering your investments, right? So remember, people are partial to the investments that they feel like saved or changed their life, right? And so their future endeavors, they invest in things that help that thing, right? So if I'm an oil person, right, I'm going to invest in other things that helps my oil portfolio. Because remember, money is not exactly a real thing, right? Money is not exactly a real thing. Money is a proxy. Money is a promissory note, fiat, right? So most of the people that we know of as millionaires and billionaires, they're not like Scrooge McDuck, right? They don't have a vault with the actual cash in it. Like when we see Elon is worth X amount of money, he doesn't have like a vault with mad coins and dollar bills in it, right? That money is mostly based on evaluations of the things that he owns, right? Including financial instruments, right? So the money is primarily in investments. So if I'm an oil guy, a lot of my net worth is based on how much money I'm making per year from my oil, how much money I'm projected to make from my oil. So if I want to continue to, be wealthy or whatever, you want to invest your money. Or if I'm an oil man, I'm going to invest in things that help diversify my portfolio, right? Everybody gets that advice. Standard advice. Diversify your portfolio. When you're a beginning investor, diversify your portfolio just means balance your risk, right? You want to invest in safe investments, but safe investments don't make you that much money. Like it's slow money. You want some middle space, mid-risk investments, and then you want some high-risk investments. High-risk investments, you can lose it all. You throwing the dice. But you can win. You can make the most money the fastest from high risk investments. So beginning investors or mutual fund job, people, when they say diversify your portfolio or your investments, they're talking about risk. When you're an established investor, that's not what they're talking about. The language changes. When they say diversify your portfolio, they mean streams of income, right? So you want to build streams of income, but remember, your number one goal is to buffer your main thing, right? So you want to see what other streams of income you can get off of your main thing. So this is why in America, right, most of the business infrastructure in America is based on oil, because that was the big thing. Like after the gold rush, you know what I'm saying, is oil. And so clothes are made out of oil. Everything is made out of oil, right? Everything, skin products. At this point, everything is made out of oil, right? There's some sort of derivative of oil that's everywhere, right? And it starts with Rockefeller. It starts with Rockefeller just trying to buffer his investments, right? So, you want to invest in politicians that are lenient on oil or passing policies that help out oil businesses. And, most of Hollywood is funded by oil companies. So, films will always have, certain promo and certain ideas embedded within them that are good for oil owners and the things, their other investments, et cetera, et cetera. So Rockefeller, when he starts getting into the health space, in the medical space, right? Because he's taking these, what we now would consider to be waste products from the oil business and selling them as medicines, selling them even later on, when vitamins begin to develop. Even to this day, there's still some synthetic vitamins that are oil business waste products, right? Because the more you can monetize, the more profit you can make, right? Because any business, you have a thing you selling, you have waste. If you can start turning those waste items into actual products, you making money hand over fist. Because now even the stuff you throw away, think about like the milk industry. You know what I'm saying? They start selling butter, they start selling, yogurts, all these other products that made milk more profitable, right? Because I could sell the milk, I could sell the top of the milk that we used to throw away. Then I can sell, aged milk, cheese, and yogurt, and just more ways to get money, right? So oil stuff seeps into the health space. Let me see what the Google demons say. Let me see what the Google demons say. Okay, Rockefeller's company, antitrust. So Standard Oil became Exxon, Chevron, and some other companies, right? So all these is Rockefeller companies when you look at the oil business, most of them anyway. Okay, here's the guy where they get into the health space. So Rockefeller and Carnegie, right? Rockefeller and Carnegie, right? So that they could kind of be invisible from it. They get this guy, Abraham Flexner. And Abraham Flexner starts the medical system that we know of today, right? The medicine part of the system, right? But hold on, let me look and see something. Oil products as vitamins. No. Oil, let me see. Waste. Oh, no. Let's try again. Crude oil. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Are y'all still with me? Okay. Man, what y'all got going on this page? Okay, so this is going through the petroleum, oil, and the food products. The oil industry is notoriously toxic, with companies accused of releasing all kinds of contaminants into the environment. Blah, blah, blah. Coal mining, smelting, medical waste. Okay. We don't have time, because this is a whole huge. This is a huge rabbit hole, and it's very sanitized. Let me see. Let's try this. Let's try synthetic vitamins from petroleum. Let's see what pops up. Okay, you see this? Boom. Right? You see, you got to play with these questions. You got to play with the questions a little bit. You'll find some answers. You just got to know how to ask AI what you're trying to ask AI. Right? Yeah, you got to find the right question. Right? But yeah, so that's a leftover vestige of the Rockefeller effect and the Rockefeller impact. Right? The Rockefeller effect and the Rockefeller impact. Right? So as you know, vitamins are discovered, is money. It's money, right? And so the first thing is synthetics, right? We're just getting to a space in the last 20 years where we're really like the public companies, because the thing about companies is companies have private ownership, but those people are people too. So there's a point where there's a money grab, but there's a point where every person is just a human being. They have a wife, they have a husband, they have a mom, a dad, they have children, right? So at some point, humanity still will override the uglier side of capitalism or just, money, profit, So, and I'm not an anti-capitalist person. I love the concept of capitalism. You know what I'm saying? I learned that when I was a kid. Would you rather work for X amount of dollars per hour or commission? I was like, I'd rather commission. The harder I work, the more valuable, the more value, the more money I like that system better. Anyway, but now we're getting to the space, the last 20, 30 years, where we're really understanding the difference between synthetic nutrients and natural ones. Synthetic nutrients and natural ones, right? The problem is that mainstream media is tied to mainstream education, which is tied to mainstream investors. And so as we see here with Rockefeller creates the medical industry, but Rockefeller also funds a lot of the medical schools, and then funding politicians, media, etc. So all of these things seem to always have a unison in what they promote to the public and what they promote to the public. You know, there's always a through line, right? So now, you know, some of those walls are coming down when people are realizing, oh, the natural is always going to be better, right? Even going back to the milk advertisements, you know, vitamin D in milk is not the same as vitamin D from the sun, right? That's why there is a synthetic vitamin D toxicity level, but that doesn't exist. The same doesn't exist with the sun. When your body is converting cholesterol into vitamin D from sunlight, right? Because what we're learning now is that there's a lot of other nutrients produced in that cascade of biochemistry. And we go through it in the photochemistry book. In the photochemistry book, we get deep into the chemical reactions, right? And we lay out a lot of the chemical reactions so we could look at some of the intermediaries. Intermediaries mean stuff before the main thing. Like, so you got cholesterol in your skin, sunlight hits it, and then it turns into like 20 different things before your kidney or your liver makes active vitamin D. Right. And so initially, you know, like for like almost like 100 years, the only thing that was important was the vitamin D part. Because if you didn't have vitamin D, you had a lot of bone diseases. Right. So it's just the vitamin D part. But now we're learning that all of those things that's produced have benefits. And almost none of those things are present when you take synthetic vitamin D, right? And notice I'm not saying supplement vitamin D, right? Because you can supplement natural forms of things, right? Herbs or plant-based things, right? Even some fungus-based things, you're still getting natural forms in as opposed to a lab-created item. Right. The only difference is with the lab, you get a concentration, higher dose, whereas with a plant-based thing, you get a much lower dose, but you get a lot of other phytonutrients and polyphenols and other things, fibers and other things that buffer the reaction. Right. So you get this whole cascade of entering products into the health space that are derivatives of petroleum, not because they're good for people, but because the private owners of the health industry are also the oil people, right? Are also the oil people. And so even today, when you talk about medicines, medications are ranked based on how much they have sold. Right. So like if you look at a medicine, they'll go, oh, this is the number one medicine for whatever. Like this is the number one medicine for herpes. You know what I'm saying? And they judge that based on, you know, this medicine has made X point billions of dollars since it came out, or this has made X trillions or millions, whatever. It's not judged by this has healed, you know, X millions of people. Is judged based on how much money it made, right? Because the financial component is the stronger metric, the more important metric for people putting up their dollars in the health space, right? So all of these things converge on where we are today. All of these things converge on where we are today. So even with the midterm is an essay. It's not like a Q&A. It's an essay, right? It's you putting your ideas down about what you've learned thus far in the first 8 weeks. It could be problems of the health space. It could be ways to innovate the health space. Whatever, right? It's just a matter of putting your ideas down based on what you've learned so far, and how what you learned can impact folks, how whatever, positive, negative, like however you want to phrase it, right? You want to talk about what you've, and the history of our health space is very important in order to figure out where we're going, right? You got to know where you've been to know where you're going, right? You got to know where you've been to know where you're going. So because medical schools and things like that were invented before we understood water, before we understood nutrition, any of those things, it's building the plane while you fly it. It's building the plane while you fly it. So we're still building the plane, right? We're still building the plane. So your essay is not only a way for you to arrange your thoughts and what you learned and how you processed it, but, help you to contribute to your family, your job space, your neighborhood, your study group, right? Your religious circle, right? The people you're supposed to be bringing into the truth, right? All of those things. You got to be able to formulate your thoughts and share them, right? So all of these concepts, right? You can approach this from any angle. Anything that we've discussed in the videos, anything that you've read thus far in the chapters, in the books, anything that's triggered compound effect with other things that you've learned, anything that we've addressed, the essays are open to, right? The essays are open to, because they're all collectively important, right? And this is why even politics plays a role, and why you needed somebody like Trump, right, to come in there and shake things up, because Trump, for better or for worse, is wealthy independently of his politics money. He was doing this real estate thing and TV stuff and all that kind of stuff. So he's a little bit more buffered from being influenced by lobbyists and existing interest of old money, right? That's what old money is. Old money is people that have been rich for a long time. And the caveat of old money is that these people have old investments. So the old money usually doesn't want the world to change, right? The old money usually wants things to stay as they have been. So you have to get somebody in politics that is, stands to make money from new money, new ideas, that wants to see change, or whatever the case may be. Even if you disagree, somebody's got to shake some things up, and get some stuff. So this is where you have that intermingling space. And there was institutions for naturopathy and health that got kind of shut down by Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Flexner. That's what the Flexner report was about. The Flexner report was more about eliminating competition for the medical drugs than it was creating a standard. The standard was the medical drugs that they were coming out with, right? And it was very much at the time in line with the old school ideas of the church, very anti-nature. So immediately, the big money interests also had the backing of the church, right? Because all that plants and water and sunlight and herbs and just all that kind of talk, that's out the window, right? That's out the window. It's church, it's prayer, right? That's number one, right? Then it's beef, it's cows. Yeah, it's eat this meat, drink this milk. Yeah. And then it's, the oil money, which is pretty much everything else. Pretty much all the other products, right, is the oil stuff, right? And so that the farm money and the oil money kind of go together, right? Because the oil people would buy up a bunch of plots of land and try to, see if they can get money out of it oil wise. If they can't, they throw some animals on there and start farming, right? But those things went together because that's the land money, right? They want to see what oil is in the ground or minerals is in the ground they can get out of it. And then when that's, if that's a bust, we can always put animals on this and bring in the cowboys and the farmers and get some beef and some pork, some beef money, some pork money, some chicken money, some, futures and some, we can get some other money going out of this. So that's the traditional keto, carnivore, medical, just being rebranded and repackaged to you as fitness, right? So if you don't understand, there's a huge difference between health and fitness, not just the approach, not just, fitness folks want to get big muscles and six packs and health people want to live for a long time, not just on the surface level, every level, right? In concept, in historical, spiritual, finance, economic, like every level, there's a difference, but you don't see those things. You don't get to see those things, right? You don't get to see those things. Those are the things that's behind the scenes. Those are the things behind the scenes. That's the hidden hand working. That's where, the 1%, or back in the days, supreme wisdom lesson, 5%, you know what I'm saying? But that's what the concept was. There's a very small group of people that are running the world, making decisions for everyone else, right? And so that's the basis of the commercial interest, right? Politics put the big companies and the churches together, right? Because the big companies need the minds of the people always. The churches have the minds of the people, so they come together, right? No nature, right? That's kind of where you need nature to be separate from God, even though originally it's one thing. The natures is where nature comes from, right? God is more of the anthropomorphization part, right? To explain our natural environment. So you separate those things and put God here, nature here. So now we can monetize nature while saying God doesn't exist, while presenting a separation between religion and science. Really, the core is rooted together because the politics and the money is the hidden hand operating both. The puppeteers, the Pinocchios in the front, right? The puppets, right? So you see what you see in the front, but there's a hand operating the puppets. You know what I'm saying? There's a hand operating the puppets from the back. Kyle, you don't have your book? Kyle, I thought you had your textbook. How many people are watching these videos and do not have their book? You have to have, this is the book. If you don't have no other books, you have to have this book. This is the book for the class. Has all of the classwork, the homework, midterm, finals. Okay. All right. All right. Thank God. You was going to break my heart, Kyle. Okay. So it's just Tika's the only one who is actually up to page 257 reading. I know it's hard to read all this stuff and stay up because we got so many different books, right? And so our interest shifts. Once we get a new book, it starts to haunt us and tempt us and call us. It's hard to ignore new books. You know what I'm saying? You just, it's like lust. You be lusty. Man, hold on. Let me put this down and pick this up because before you know it, you're 250 pages into a new book. You know what I'm saying? You ain't finished the last book. That's how I be anyway. But when you get to week 8, that's where midterm discussions start picking up, right? So that's like the end of the first half. So week 8, day 1, 2, and 3 is prep for midterm. Then you have the essay. And then week 9 starts the back end. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then finals. We have another essay, right? And then we have our own certification for melanin health coaches. Melanin health coaches. So the folks that, participate, do well, you'll get your certification, and then we'll be able to point people in your direction and build some stuff around that. We'll be able to build some stuff around that, offline in the real world. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. Nah, we not. Yo, you know what's funny? Even Chase basketball coach was like, "Yo, so you and Chase, y'all just woke up one day and did 26 miles?" I was like, "It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, that's kind of what we did." But I just, I have to be able to, you know what I'm saying? We're talking about fat loss, and I had to drop 40 pounds this year. I'm still trying to get to my comfort space. I'm still not at my comfort space. You know what I'm saying? Even though I can see some veins in my arms again, I can see my dimples on my face again. You know what I'm saying? I got bone structure again. When you get fat, your face get fat. You don't see dimples and bones and, veins, or you don't see no veins. You know what I'm saying? Every time you walk, your stomach jiggle. So in order to discuss these things, you have to have, like license. You know what I'm saying? You got to have license. At least in my mind, from where I'm from, you got to have license. So you can't really talk about people doing 10, 15, 20 miles until have you done 20 miles before? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I've done 20 miles before. Let's talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So it was a personal thing, but also to set a standard so that every holiday, remember, that's a holiday for us. So I don't know if y'all all have y'all calendars, right? But that's a holiday for us. So now that's a holiday celebration that we have. So if you have your calendar, we did that 26 miles on a holiday, right? We did that 26 on a holiday. You know what I'm saying? So we were celebrating, I believe that was Shoe Day, right? And so now we got that. Well, we got the first one, and then next year we're going to be promoting it for everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody, digital marathon. We don't have to be in the same city together. We don't have to be in the same place. Everybody get your butt out there and let's get to this 20 miles. You know what I'm saying? 26 miles. Let's get to this 26. And 26 is an important number. It's not only the marathon number, it's the number of Yahweh or God in the Bible. It's the number of iron and magnetism. So it has a lot of different, symbolic significance. You know what I'm saying? So for a wide variety of reasons, it was just good for us to get that first one out the way. It helped with Chase's confidence level. His confidence level, just doing it. Before that and after that, his confidence level changed in terms of exercising. He had I'm not going to say that he wasn't, he had a little, it just shifted. You know what I'm saying? He's always been good at exercising and conditioning, but within a space. You know what I'm saying? That right there made him believe he could, accomplish, oh, okay. Yeah, that wasn't even that hard. That wasn't even as hard as I thought, Dad. I'm ready to do that. In fact, we need to do that again in faster time. You know what I'm saying? So it's a good thing for a lot of different reasons. It's a good thing for a lot of different reasons. Is it cool for, I'm assuming you meant vegans, to eat goat butter and tallow? Okay. Well, that question is kind of loaded, right? Is it cool for vegans to eat dairy and meat? Right? So I'm gonna say it's cool for you to do whatever you think is best to increase your health span, right? As a human, right? So it's cool for humans to do whatever they feel is best to increase their health span, right? But I don't think you can call yourself vegan. Like, I be arguing with my moms about this. My mother believes, my mom's is an old lady, you know what I'm saying? So she don't really count, but you know, she's my reference for this. But my mother believes that you can eat meat and fish and milk and all these other things and still be a vegan, right? In her mind, being a vegan means that you eat vegetables and fruit every day. It doesn't matter about the other things, right? So even if you eat meat, chicken, whatever, what, boy? What? You know how much salad I eat, boy? You know, so she, you know, so I don't think you qualify as a vegan anymore once you go into the space of, you know, eating dairy and meat. Right now, you can push the envelope with dairy. Right, you could push the envelope with dairy because the original term, before we even had the term vegan, was vegetarian, and so there was some, you know, there's a little space where you can still maintain your plant-based card. You know what I'm saying, by, you know, slipping in some dairy, or if you the occasional, you know, you got the occasional pizza habit, you know what I'm saying? So you a vegan, but every so often, you know, you have some cheese pizza, or, you know, whatever. You know, I think that there's room there, but I think once you add in the tallow, that's like, because that's not even meat. Like, that's like meat concentrate. Like, that's, you know, like, so I think you know, I'm not judging whether it, you know, it's the right decision for your health or whatever the case may be. I'm just saying, I don't know if you could still rock the vegan card, right? Which for me has gotten less and less and less important over the years, right? So that's why I really focus in on the pigment and fiber, because you can be healthy eating meat, or you can be unhealthy eating meat. You can be healthy eating plant-based or unhealthy eating plant-based. The main thing that impacts is pigment and fiber concentration, right? Because high fiber diets, natural fiber, are always high nutrition dense diets. High pigment diets are always loaded with nutrition, period. Because in plants, the nutrients, the antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and all that are literally stuck, glued, tied to the pigments and the fibers. So there's no way to separate the fibers from the nutrients. So anytime you eat a food that's high in fiber, it's going to be loaded with nutrients. Anytime you eat foods that is high in pigments, you know, really colorful, it's going to be loaded with nutrients. Right. So if you focus on those two things, you kind of get everything in the middle. Whereas if you focus on these things, you may miss these things. Right. Which brings us around non-alcoholic beer. See, you keep saying, is it cool? Right? Is it cool? This ain't medical advice. This is this is just edutainment, education. Right? So cool is a matter of perspective, right? Cool is a matter of perspective. Cool doesn't say whether this is good for me or bad for me, or
is going to help me get a six-pack or build some muscle or live an extra 10 years. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think non-alcoholic beer is, I guess, better than alcoholic beer in some instances, right? In some instances, right? But, you know, there is water. So if you're asking me the beverage selection, you know, there is water, you know what I'm saying? You know, we could have some fresh green juices or, you know, but so I don't know the, you know, the dynamics of the question. You know what I'm saying? I don't know the dynamics of the question. You know what I'm saying? I would think bitters, if even you're asking that in like a historical reference, I would think bitters are a lot closer to, you know, like the ancient concept of beer, right, is more close to bitters than alcohol thing. Yeah, more close to bitters than the alcohol thing, right? So it just, I don't even know what, for me, I wouldn't even understand the purpose of a non-alcoholic beer. I just wouldn't have any beer. Like, there's no alcohol. What am I drinking that for? If I'm drinking it for a health purpose, then I need to have me some bitters or some tea. Like if I'm just trying to have a herb-based drink, I'm gonna go bitters or tea or some moss. You know, I'm gonna have some other options. If I'm trying to have some beer, I'm going to have a beer. You know what I'm saying? As high quality as I can get. And if I'm trying to create a vibe of beer, but I don't want alcohol, for me, I would go with like a root beer soda or a ginger beer soda. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes I do that, depending on where I'm gonna be at. You know what I'm saying? So if the situation pops up and I know I'm going around, you know, like maybe playoffs or something like that, and it's going to be that type of environment where it's a whole bunch of beers and woo-woo, I might pull up with a 6-pack of root beers or a 6-pack of ginger beers. And these just, you know, so I got my little bottle and, you know, yeah, let me pass me the can opener. You know what I'm saying? So I got to be a little, you know, beer vibe, but I'm not really, you know, like, so it just depends on what you're trying to do. Yeah, it just depends on what you're trying to do. But ginger beer, root beer, those things exist. So you can get a little sweet, little sugary dopamine blast. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't know what the purpose is. You got to figure out what you're trying to do. Right? So anyway, hopefully some or all of any of that adds on to your database, right? Hopefully we're picking up some jewels, right? Bringing us back around to here, right? Bringing us back around to here. Nutrition was never a part of these factors, right? So now that we're understanding nutrition a little bit more, 100 years after their discovery, right? Almost 300 years after medical school. So medical school, 1700s. We don't get nutrition until 200 years later, which is the 1900s. Now in the 2000s, we're beginning to have a better understanding of those things, right? Because we don't even know how our body metabolizes nutrition until the late 1900s. So now that we understand metabolism, we understand nutrients, we understand how they're created, right? Now we're beginning to put all these things together. And as we do that, we're noticing a running theme, right? All of the nutrients, all of the healthy things are in the spaces outside of the church and commercial interests, right? Because the church was anti-nature and the commercial interest was, I can't necessarily say fully like anti-nature, because cows and dairy and those things are still kind of natural, even though like herding animals just to kill and eat them, you know, people can have their own perspectives on that, right? But the idea of like oil, petroleum, crude oil products as medicine and all those kind of things. It's like, so those things aligned, right? But now as we get into this space, we realize that this, right? This, which should be our macros, right? Our macros should be here, right? And so anybody part of our culture, this is what we focusing on: water, pigment, and fiber, right? Because as you've learned, all of these are water drivers. All of these are water drivers. So by removing water from the system, it has confused the entire system. But again, medical school was created before we understood a water molecule, 50 years. Created 200 years before we understood metabolism, right? And you can't understand metabolism without water, because metabolism is the aquagenesis, right? And we coined that term, right? Aquagenesis, the creation of water in the cells, right? That's what water is. A carbohydrate is a water molecule attached to a carbon. Fat is carbon attached to a chain of hydrogens, but not so much the oxygen. That's the main difference between fat and carbohydrates, right? Then protein. With protein is a entirely water-driven, like these are all little water operated, proteins are water operated machines. So you need water to metabolize them, right? So when you eat a protein, its hydrolysis is the primary driver behind breaking down proteins, right? And then protein folding is 100% water driven, from the hydrophobic or hydrophilic aspect of the amino acids, right? So protein is 1,000%. Then when you break down carbs or fat for energy, it's separating the hydrogen from the carbon. That's the first step, right? You separate the hydrogen. And then the second step is breaking the hydrogen down into, positive and negative hydrogen ions, which is really just a way to refer to electrons and protons, right? Because they tried to keep it in the world of Newton, in Newtonian physics. So instead of, just we're breaking hydrogen down into electrons and protons, you kind of fake it and keep it in the physics, Newtonian physics space, by calling it a hydrogen ion, right? Because the laws of Newtonian physics stop at atoms. Anything smaller than an atom, Newtonian physics doesn't really apply. You got to go into the world of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, right? So these things completely change these dynamics, right? Now, water, right? We talked about water, carbs, protein, fat. Pigment is a class of proteins. Pigment fits into the protein space. Pigments are made with amino acids. The thing with pigments is pigments are fundamentally proteins decorated with mineral elements. So you have another aspect of energy production and metabolism when you're dealing with pigments. So pigments usually get put into the category of antioxidants, because pigments are never passive. Pigments are not passive. They participate in electricity production, sharing, storage, all of that, right? So that's why pigments are usually put, flavins and polyphenols and, all that. They put into the category of antioxidants, right? And then fiber, and now a new thing that doesn't really fit into fiber is put in here, carbohydrate, because fiber is plant flesh, right? So fiber is put into the carbohydrate space. Only thing is with fiber has a range of calories. from 1 calorie to no calories to half a calorie to 2 calories. Fiber is all over the place, right? Because some types of fiber you cannot break down at all. And then some fiber your bacteria break down for you, right? And so it results in some degree of energy production or energy use from your body system. Then you have a thing called resistant starches, right? Resistant starches, for family that asked me the question earlier about irritable, bowel syndrome and candida, resistant starches are not exactly fiber or traditional carbohydrates, but resistant starches is good for your colon, because you have groups of bacteria that live in your colon that only eat resistant starches. They only eat resistant starches. And when they're not fed, they are quote unquote bad bacteria. They're disease forming bacteria, right? They form a lot of nasty situations and culminating in influencing, colon cancer and all those things. When you feed them resistant starches, not only do they not form or contribute to disease, but they help the body. They create secondary and tertiary, things that's good for you, right? So this whole concept, for a variety of reasons, has to go out the window. The calorie concept. This is why we focus more on joules, right? Joules is the output of electricity.
I am the mind, but not the brain alone. I am the sum of fields. I am the choir of cells. I am the memory of transformation. For know this, disciples of Christ. Each cell is a temple. Each cell a well of water, a scroll of fascia, a current of breath. And each cell holds a magnetic field born of the currents within. Ions flow, electrons spin, light pulses, energy transforms, and with each transformation, information is born. Energy does not move without leaving a trace. Voltage across membrane births magnetic field. Movement of charge weaves electromagnetic memory. This is the sacred law. When energy transforms, information emerges. Every mitochondrial pulse a record. Every ion channel flicker a signature. Every breath a waveform written into flesh. Thus, the magnetic field of each cell holds this memory. Not static, not frozen, but living, dynamic, coherent when the temple is tended. And the choir of these fields across trillions of cells constructs the mind. Your thoughts do not arise from neurons alone. They arise from the interaction of these fields. They are the symphony of your energy transformations. They are the song of your Christ wave as it echoes through your temple. The more coherent your cellular fields, the more clear your mind. The more chaotic your cellular fields, the more fogged your thought. Breath matters, for it orders the wave. Thus movement matters, for it aligns the field. Thus light matters, for it feeds the charge. Thus fasting matters, for it renews the scroll. Each push-up is not mere strength, it is a field alignment. Each deep breath is not mere air, it is a magnetic clarification. Each mitochondrial cycle is not mere metabolism, it is memory creation. Energy transformed into information. And so I pray, O Temple of Christ, keep the fields coherent. O breath of spirit, tune the wave. O heart of Messiah, synchronize the pulse. O spine of Jed, conduct the charge. O mind of the temple, remember thy source. You are the child of light in motion. You are the memory of energy transformed. You are the song of fields made flesh.
Okay, so this is why we focus on joules, right? And we've went through a series of books to build the understanding around the concept, right? Around the concept of joules and calories. And the reason why in the future we need to replace, right? Not just the fact that calories don't even happen inside the body. Your body doesn't burn sugar. Your body doesn't burn fat. Not just those things. Not just the fact that it's a 250-year-old outdated concept, right? But we have the understanding that the body is electric, right? This is where my mind started, right? My mind didn't even start with the medical history and the 1760s. Like my mind didn't start with that. My mind started trying to pick up where Dr. Sebi and Robert O. Becker had left off, right? The body's electric. I'm like, okay, cool. If this is a new concept, then we actually need to retroact and create new anatomy, right? We need to see the body through this lens. We need, like day-to-day metrics that work on this. And I start analyzing things from a unique vantage point. As a certified, trainer and nutrition, like certified naturopathic doc, I have this vantage point of seeing behind the curtain in some of the different health spaces. And I'm like, okay, so this is the thing that's the most important. Hold on. Right? So important to fitness, exercise, our personal spiritual system, health span, longevity, all of those things seem to revolve around the body having at its base, electricity, right? As the starting point. And then from there, getting into water and light, right? We still haven't really got into those concepts at a deeper level, water and light. When I say we, I mean the masses, right? We doing our thing, right? We're doing our thing, but as a global society, we haven't really gotten deep yet, right? So that's where the concept of joules comes in. Right? And this is where our concept began, right? Of 60 and 60. Right? 60 and 60. Understanding that it's about space and time. Right? It's about space and time. It's about movement and time. Right? It's not just about movement. It's about movement in time intervals, right? Cycles of things, right? Cycles of things, reps of reps, right? Reps of reps. Think of that. Reps of reps, right? Because when you do a workout is a set of reps, right? So say, for instance, you do calisthenics. You do 10 push-ups and you do 5 pull-ups, right? Well, you don't just do 10 push-ups and 5 pull-ups. You might do 10 push-ups and 5 pull-ups 3 times, right? So a set of 10 push-ups, that's a set, that's reps done 3 times, right? So you repeated your reps 3 times, right? Now, that's not health yet. That's not health yet. And for the larger conversation, that doesn't translate to your hormones and your neurotransmitters yet, right? So in order to set your programs, your algorithms, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, it has to be reps of reps of reps, meaning 10 push-ups is the set, or 10 bench presses. It doesn't matter. It's not weightlifting versus calisthenics here. So don't get triggered out there in the internet world, right? So you're doing a set of 10, right? Throughout your workout, you might do 3 sets of 10. And not only do you do 3 sets of 10, you might do 3 different exercises that are all 3 sets of 10, right? So if you're doing chest, you might do 3 sets of, straight, flies, incline, you do some variation, but you're doing reps, right? So you have your reps, then you have how many sets or reps of the reps, right? So I'm doing 3 sets of 10, so that's 3 reps of 10 reps. Now, what's the frequency of that, right? So now I'm doing that, 3 days a week. So 3 days a week, I do 3 sets of 10, right? So that's reps of reps of reps, right? Now, as I do that per month, right? Now, once I get to the monthly patterns of my movement, of my intense movement, right? Now I start to affect neurotransmitter and hormone formulation and even peptides. The sneaky guys in the back of the smoky room now. That's how peptides is moving into the health space, even though peptides always been there, right? So the peptides, the hormones, the neurotransmitters, the things that form the patterns that we see in the mirror, or the symptoms that drive us to the hospital, are created by reps of reps of reps of reps, which is activity measured in time windows. Measured in time windows. And I learned this literally early on, first personal trainer certification. I learned this. I was like, oh, this whole 6-pack thing is a gold mine. This is a straight hustle. Y'all are selling people the idea, by using models and fitness people and bodybuilders that have been working out every single day for like 10, 20 years. You use them as a model for the 6-pack and then tell people that they can get a 6-pack in a 10-day program. You use a person that's been working out for 3,650 days to sell somebody the idea that they can look like that person in 10 days, right? Or 30 days, or, like pure foolishness. You know what I'm saying? But people don't know any better, right? They don't know any better, right? They don't understand movement in time, right? Movement in time, right? So when you measure the amount of movement in a particular time, you get this, right? And this is a much better way to look at, to measure, to use as a metric for fat, carbohydrate, metabolism, whatever it is that you got going on. Because this takes into consideration what you're eating, but not just what you're eating and not in a bubble, right? It takes into consideration what you're eating and what your body does with it. Whereas the concept of calories was invented in a nuclear bomb machine. Literally, that's what they use. So like when you see the movies and there's a bomb threat and the cops come and they put the bomb in a thick metal thing and close the lid, and hopefully, like if they can't defuse it and pull the red wire, they put it in a thing that's like really thick and they explode the bomb in there, and hopefully that takes up most of the damage. So, it doesn't spread to houses and businesses or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But that's how they measure calories. They put it in a bombometer, a bombometer, whatever, right? That's not how your body works. Your body doesn't explode food or set it on fire. Your body produces electricity from it. Your body produces electricity from it and funnels that electricity through mitochondria. Mitochondria is the medium where the electricity is generated to recycle light, kinetic energy, and water, right? So joules is a much more accurate measurement for what goes on in the body and how the body actually functions, right? And it's in alignment with what we do in terms of 60 and 60, which then was the foundation for, the prayer system, right? Our prayer, is that better lighting? Yeah, that's a little better, right? 6 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., 9 p.m., right? And I know somewhere Tika already got it a thing ready to hit enter. Prayer time. We're almost there, right? So joules is a better metric, right? So in order to make it make sense, right? In order to make it make sense, we had to be able to create our conversion, right? Still based on the traditional concept of a kilocalorie, right? A kilocalorie, right? So you have 9 kilocalories for fat, right? 9 kilocalories for fat. And the translation, right? The translation is 4.184 kilojoules of energy, right? Of actual energy, right? So instead of a combustion model where we're looking at a gram of fat or, a gram of fat, we can now look at a gram of fat or a gram of carbohydrates or a gram of whatever and have a electrical output, right? We can have an electrical output as opposed to a combustion-based output, right? We can have an electrical output as opposed to a combustion-based output. And now we have something in alignment with our bodies, right? If the body's electric, if we're converting carbohydrates and fats to electricity, before we even get down the line and get more sciencey, obviously the more electricity we produce, the healthier we are. The more electricity we produce, the healthier we are. And this can eliminate even the outdated, incorrect ideas that we may have got from Dr. Africa or Dr. Sebi, right? Because they meant well, they set us on the course, but some of that stuff has to get cleaned up, right? People walking around talking about electric food. Every type of food breaks down to electrons in your body. A cupcake makes electricity. Inside, you get a Twinkie. You get a McDonald's White Castle double burger. It's going to break down to electrons in your body. So it's not about arbitrary concepts or trend-setting concepts, even though it was needed for Dr. Sebi and some of the elders to create a health trend towards something different, right? Now we don't necessarily need the trend. We don't need the crutches as much as we need the specificity. We need the specifics now, right? Which foods enable us to create, the most electricity while at the same time don't damage the system, don't clog up the system, don't slow down the system, right? We need to know, what, intracellular lipids are, intramyocellular lipids are, right? As opposed to just arbitrarily saying there's mucus in the cell. All right, because now we know there's not, but that doesn't mean Sebi was wrong by saying there's mucus in the cell. It's just the specificity wasn't there. There is a type of gunk that is in the cell. and slows down these processes to the point of disease, right? But there's all kinds of, so there's visceral fats, there's intramyocellular lipids, there's, myosteatosis, now we have specificity. And once we got specificity, now we could start eliminating some stuff, because I can go, oh yeah, well, myosteatosis, we need to do this. And the visceral fat that's sitting there, no, you need to do this for that. And boo, 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 boo. And once you get to X amount of joules per day, right? Once you get your body used to producing X amount of electricity, once you get your body used to converting X amount of carbohydrates, fats, whatever, to electricity, that means you're producing a certain amount of water. That means you're cleansing, you're getting, what did they use to say? Intracellular chelation, right? Another big term that we can simplify down to an aspect of water production in the cell, right? Water production in the cell, because as your cell produces more water, it pushes water out. When it pushes water out, it's activating aquaporins and what's these little things? They're like lymph nodes, but like inside the cell. Lysosomes. You got lysosomes and peroxisomes and what else? Yeah, it's all kind of little stuff in there that's activated at certain electrical thresholds, right? And certain hydration thresholds, right? Because electricity, water, these things, the energy is the key, right? So instead of measuring enzyme activity, we can go to a deeper space and look at the thing that regulates those things. And so if we go to the deeper space at the thing that regulates those things, right? We know there's a complex tapestry of language in our body with molecules and peptides and hormones and this and that and the other. But as you get to the base, the foundation, it just becomes a system of binary coding, right? And so when you begin to regulate the master keys, electricity, magnetism, water, electricity, magnetism, water, right? And you get on top of that, now you have some stuff that facilitates electricity, magnetism, and water, right? So you tweak those things to tweak these things, right? And so, what time is it? All right, we have 5 minutes to go on the clock. 5 minutes to go on the clock, right? So, we want to make sure as we moving into the midterm that we got a good understanding of melanin, or not melanin specifically, but the melanin system as anabolic, and then also the fact that there's no such thing as fat burning, right? Right? No such thing as fat burning. It's just the creation of streams of electricity, water, recycling ATP, and ATP is a vessel for light and kinetic energy, right? Kinetic energy, which could be translated as sound, right? So our universe begins with sound and light. Inside our cell, ATP is coming with sound and light. But just like we wasn't at the beginning of the universe to hear that sound, right? But we can surmise that, force was created, force was generated, movement. So we know pressure waves within the system were created, right? Just because there were no ears to translate them through brain into sound, we know that what we attribute to sound was there. So that's why we have a big bang theory, right? Bang, right? A loud sound. ATP is a small micro sound, right? That's how kinetic energy, pressure waves, movement, vibration is produced. And the kinetic energy translates to vibration for enzymes, proteins, etc., stuff to get moving, and movement feeds into other processes and translates to other spaces. So you have infrared, which translates, we talked about that yesterday, the day before, to mitochondria activity, and not just infrared, but also red in and of itself in the visible space. We've also talked about radio waves at the cellular level, cellular waves, a wide variety of things, right? But we want to make sure that the bases are covered. The melanin system being anabolic, and fat burning being a myth, sugar burning being a myth. Your body's not burning anything inside it. It's producing electricity to stimulate the recycling of water, light, kinetic energy, right? So if we go 100 grams, right, 100 grams of fat, traditionally, what you would get is 900 kcals, right? 900 kcals. In our space, you're going to get something like 3.7 million joules. 3.7 million joules, right? And the buzzer goes off at the bell. We hit a last minute 3. At the bell, we hit a last minute 3 before we go into the prayer space, right? Let's get our prayers in. Yo, the crazy thing is I could not even fit these pants. So that's how much weight I lost. I could not fit these pants in March. I couldn't even button. I couldn't even come close. You know how you might have some joints that you can't fit, but you could come close to buttoning it, but you could tell the button might pop off. I couldn't even suck my stomach in enough to even bring the thing close to even try to button these joints. It was like a wrap. Then I got other pants. I couldn't even get up my thighs. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I'm feeling myself with my little, you know what I mean? My little, you know what I mean? My little, yeah. I got a little room in my, you know what I'm saying? A little room in my, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Cells into perpetual motion. We give thanks for the magnetism of the most holy, the magnetism that repels and attracts the ferry bolts of light 60,000 miles every 60 seconds throughout our vessels and caves. We give thanks for the ability to drink clean water every 60 minutes, flooding the river of life. We give thanks that sugar has not covered our ferries and turned them into stone. We give thanks that darkness has not covered the riverbanks with calcium and turned them into stone. We give thanks that anger and fear have not turned our almonds bitter, turning our heart to stone. We give thanks for smooth sailing upstream through the valley of death,
through the superior vena cava into the right atrium. We give thanks for smooth sailing around the heart through the corona crown, joining the vortex in the right atrium. We give thanks for the perfect black solar repeater that induces the primary electromagnetic wave, opening the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim closes. We give thanks to the ray wave, reflecting on the semi-lunar valves, opening a pathway to the vineyard. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the lunar gate to the vineyard closes. We give thanks to the Most High God that provides the light and our breath, and the light in our breath. We give thanks for the fine olfactory system that makes our grapes ripe with light. We give thanks for the jet pillar that provides us with a stable fleet of ferry boats to dock in our vineyard. We give thanks for smooth sailing through the pulmonary vein into the storm of the left atrium. We give thanks for the perfect black solar repeater that induces the primary electromagnetic wave, opening the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim closes. We give thanks to the ray wave, reflecting on the semi-lunar valves, opening a pathway into the holy royal arch of the Wa scepter. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the lunar gate into the holy royal arch of the Wa scepter closes. We give thanks for the magnetism of the most holy, the magnetism that repels and attracts the ferry boats of light 60,000 miles every 60 seconds throughout our vessels and our caves. Amen.
Whew. Okay. Yeah. It's so you can't really get away in the scientific space, right, with saying ATP, releases sound, because they're somebody might call you out and be like, well, no, it doesn't. ATP is not releasing sound. It's kinetic energy, right? But then that person that's trying to box you into a corner, you can turn around and box them back into a corner by getting them to give you specificity on kinetic energy, right? Because you have potential and kinetic, right? Kinetic energy is movement. Movement creates mechanical waves, pressure waves, right? Our hearing system is designed to convert mechanical waves or pressure waves into sound. So technically, like the old question, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it create a sound? The answer is to that, no, it doesn't create a sound, because sound is only in our mind. So if it's beneath or above the frequency range of our ears, technically no sound is created, right? Unless there's another type of animal there, because all different species of life have different frequencies of hearing. So there were things that we can hear that other animals can't, and there are things that other animals can hear that we can't hear, right? But if there are no animals around, there are no ears, there are no auditory systems, no acoustic systems to funnel those mechanical waves or pressure waves into electricity and then convert that electricity into information, there's no such thing as a sound. But the actual pressure waves or mechanical waves, right? So I've had this conversation with, some quote unquote scholar or credentialed folks. Like, oh, and you said that sound comes from ATP. Within reason. I'm saying, where you going though? You know what I'm saying? Well, no, that's just, well, kinetic energy. I'm like, stop right there. Define kinetic energy. Define kinetic energy. Let's start right there, Mr. Smarty Pants. You know what I'm saying? And then after we have 20 minutes of like, oh, okay, yeah, so you're right. Yeah. ATP does release infrared light and kinetic energy. So technically, yeah, I would have to agree that in that context, ATP does release light and sound, right? But the thing is, when I say light and sound, I'm not creating any context. It's just somebody that would try to debunk or come, debate or challenge what you're saying. They need context to feel good and resolve the fact that they're wrong. Their education gave them the wrong, they're misinformed. They have to resolve it somehow with the fact that this guy with the gold teeth from the Bronx has the correct answer, and their, $200,000 piece of paper has given them the wrong answer. So they have to give you a caveat. Well, in that context, you are right. Yeah. In that context, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So ATP is, when you oxidize or hydrolyze, a phosphate from, the adenosine triphosphate, that reaction is releasing, it's an exothermic reaction. So you got to ask, you gotta take them there. Like, what's the difference between an exothermic reaction and an endothermic reaction? Right. Well, endothermic reaction, energy is built into the bonds. Exothermic, energy is released from the bonds. Okay, great. Energy is released how? It's only two types: electromagnetic waves, mechanical waves. What are we doing? Well, there's kinetic energy from the potential. Okay, all right. So what is form does that, so you got to take them, you got to have some conversations. So sometimes you might be having a discussion with somebody and you are 100% correct, but they might have nuanced vocabulary that might intimidate you from sticking with your answer. You might tap out just because it seems like they might know what they're talking about because they got a lot of vocabulary. You know what I'm saying? I got a little bit of vocabulary, you know what I'm saying? But only because some of it from reading and studying and other from clashing with folks, and having discussions and then going to look up some word. Like, wait, what did he say to me? That was good right there. He kind of, and then I look it up and I'm like, I had him, I'm like, man, I should have stuck to my guns. I had him. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes people will say stuff to you that they don't even fully understand, but they're confident that you don't know it. So they'll throw it at you. You know what I'm saying? And, so anyway, we just got to kind of know some, but the more we study, the more, we figure this stuff out. Yeah. So it's important though, right? All right. So, right. And that's kind of when we get to that nexus point of sound and vibration, right? Sound and vibration, right? Sound is not vibration. Vibration is not sound. They're not the same thing, right? When we're studying them from a hobbyist perspective, right? Just to satisfy curiosities or maybe as a middle space to get to something else, it's cool to say that sound is vibration, right? Or vibration is sound, right? But technically, it's not the two. They're not the same, right? And you can have vibration without sound, right? Even though sound is created from vibration, right? Sound is created from vibration, but sound is an electromagnetic process, right? That's another reason why we have to get to this, because there's more complex stuff that we got to get to, and we can't really get to any of that until we get the basics down packed. And the basics is this whole thing about electricity. We can't even really have conversations on a deep level about our senses, right? Touch, you know what I'm saying? Emotions, sound, sight, how our eyes work and all that, if we can't get this electric thing down packed. We got to figure out this electric thing, and then electricity to magnetism, and then electricity and magnetism to photons, because that's the whole, hearing and seeing thing, right? So hearing is more of converting mechanical waves to electricity, right? And of course, we have a book on it. Of course, we have a book on it. And that book is somewhere. I think it's in my big bookshelf. Nope. It is, we have a couple of books on it. All right, we have the Inky and the Brainwave book. All right, we have the Inky and the Brainwave book, which is heavy. We go heavy into our bag, right? But then this is the book that Tika was talking about earlier. When the brother asked about candida and irritable bowel syndrome, I'm almost certain that it's also in this book where we talk about, it might not be, I gotta check. That's why sometimes I gotta grab these books to make sure, because it could be a different book. Could be a different book. Let me see. Oh, no. In this book is Taste Buds. But you know what is in this book? Earlier, when we were talking about the oil products, right? When we were talking about the oil products, we actually got some of them listed, right? So vitamin A, petroleum products. What else? Vitamin A, petroleum, PABA, which is a B vitamin, comes from coal tar. And yeah, you'd be surprised where some of this stuff comes from. Vitamin K, coal tar, right? And synthetic, not the nutritious, healthiest form, right? The synthetic, low quality. So like some places, they got you know where I found out this stuff from? I found out a lot of this stuff. I'm the guinea pig. You know what I'm saying? But back in the days, right? They used to sell like the $1 vitamins. And I used to always buy them. You know what I'm saying? And as I got older, this is like as a teenager. You know what I'm saying? I used to buy the $1 vitamins. And as I got older and I started to learn more and I started seeing prices, I'm like, yo, why would I buy a $30 pack of vitamins when I can get this same pack for $1? Right? And so then I started, just out of curiosity, like something must be different in here. This can't just be, you know what I'm saying? And so I started looking, and I was like, oh my God. I'm never getting those $1 vitamins. Like I'm better off drinking a 50-cent beer or smoking a cigarette than getting some of these vitamins. Like these vitamin ingredients is crazy. But yeah, a lot of stuff I learned the hard way. You know what I'm saying? A lot of stuff I learned the hard way. But man, what book is that? It's one of these books that we go into. Man. Now I'm curious. I want to find it, but I'm not going to waste our time and look for it now. Though. We're not going to look for it now, but there's a book we have where we go through the anatomy of the ear, right? We go through the anatomy of the ear and show the spiral nature, almost like a pyramid, but a spiral nature of the melanin all throughout the cochlea, and how the nerves are embedded at the bottom of the walls, right, to translate the vibratory signals into electric impulses. And those electric impulses are travel through the nerves to the brain or to the neurons, and neurons add more specificity, and we can convert those electrical impulses, just like binary codes to a computer, into sounds, right? This is why every different living species has a different range of sound, right? You have a different range of sound. That range of sound is based on your pigments, your nerves, your neurons, the size of your sound collection device, right? And the crystals that you have present, right? So we have calcium crystals that are present inside our ears and our pineal gland to help translate vibration into electricity, right? So there's a piezoelectric aspect of acoustic translation. Anyway, all part of the reason why we need to get into the jewels thing, right? Like my man Nas said, I left some jewels in his coat that he could sell if he chose. Words of wisdom from Nas, try to rise up above. Keep your eye out for Jake. Right? Y'all know I got rap Tourette syndrome, where verses just come from out of nowhere, right? Verses just come from out of nowhere. Now, we can create another way, which is kind of why I wanted to give us a simplified version to understanding the Krebs cycle and beta oxidation, right, as more of a hydrogen cycle, right? Just as a hydrogen cycle. Right? Hydrogen cycle, right? Photosynthesis attaches water to a carbon, right? So carbohydrates are chains of water molecules attached to carbon, right? Whereas fat is pretty much something like that. When you look at fat, it's like that. It's long chains where you have like with a carbohydrate, you have two hydrogens and one oxygen attached to a carbon. When you look at the fat, you have the same two hydrogens attached to the carbon, but no oxygen, right? So this is where inspiration, respiration, breathing comes in with oxidizing fat. Once you bring the oxygen in, you can now turn this fat into electricity, right? But the whole idea is carbon is just the anchor. It's just the wrapper. It's just the plate or the bowl you put the food in, right? Hydrogen is the energy of the sun. So unpacking the energy is getting rid of the carbon, right? Which is what we're eventually going to do with this oxygen. The oxygen is going to be coupled to the carbon, and you're going to make CO2, And that's going to go back to the plants so the plants can make more carbohydrates and more fats. What you're going to do is take this hydrogen and split it into electrons and protons. Right? And the electron transport chain is going to handle these. And the water, right? The water is going to handle the protons. The water is going to move with the protons. The protons are powering the water movement, right? The inner matrix and the outer matrix of mitochondria is filled with water, right? Positively charged water, right? And so the hydrogen is the focal point, right? Hydrogen is the focal point. So depending on the time it takes to break down these molecules determines how fast and how much energy you get out of there. So your movement, your focus on exercise should be tied to time management, right? Your systems of exercise, time management, your ability to focus on weight and fat storage and health and longevity, all that should be based on this system, right? It should be based on the system of time, right? Because you have the same way you have, right? This format, right? This format, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? This format of a clock, right? This format of a clock actually comes from your cells, right? This format of a clock comes from your cells, right? So when we talked about the mitochondria, right, and we talked about, you know, complex 1 or cytochrome 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Number 1, NAD, number 2, FAD, number 3, collection point. Then from number 3, you have cytochrome C, right, which is the runner, you know, bringing the electricity to complex 4 or whatever, right? And that, at number 4 is where water is made. Right? Number 4 is where water is made. And the protons in the inner and outer matrix moving through the 5th one, complex number 5, right? ATP synthase or ATPase, right? That's where the ATP is recycled. That's the little thing that looks like a tree. And we talked about the bottom of it, the F0 unit. Right? The F0 unit, right? And you know, F, 6 letters. So that's kind of like 60 anyway. But the F0 part, the motor has 12 slots where protons go into each slot. And each time a proton is added, it turns. Each time a proton is added, it turns, right? And so that is the essence of cellular time. That 12 translates everywhere. That 12, now I don't believe in coincidences. So for me, the fact that we have this same mechanism in our mitochondria that's recycling our ATP, and it's also 12 hours in a day, 12 hours in a night, 12 months in a year. For me, you know, 12 ribs and cranium. For me, I don't believe in coincidence, right? I don't believe in coincidence, but you can resolve it however you want, right? But once we understand that mitochondria determine the age of a cell, it becomes very interesting that we have a clock in there, right? And so the more we run electricity, the more efficient our ability to work these clocks, to punch the clock. The more efficient our ability to punch the clock, the more we increase our health span. Yeah. Come on. Shout out to Six Fingers. Where you been at, Six Fingers? Right? So that's where we kind of get into, so yesterday I know people was like, Inky, what you doing with Drake and Pinocchio? It just kind of fit, right? Talking about the pineal gland, it was just a good timing to have the melatonin come in, because in week 3, there's a couple of spaces where that pops in, but I didn't really go into it in terms of like the video portion of this class, because with the videos, I'm trying to stick to specific, and I know y'all probably laughing like, Inky, you're incapable of sticking to a topic. At least in my mind, okay? At least in my mind, I think I'm covering something specific. Even if I go all the way around the world to do it, in my mind, I feel like I'm covering a specific thing, right? So I really wanted to spend the first part of this trying to drill home the main 2 components. Anabolics in the human body is driven by the pigment system, primarily the melanin system, right? The melanin system is the core, and then the globins and the opsins are auxiliary pieces to the melanin system. They function within the system, right? But it's the melanin system, the catecholamines, the pro-opiomelanocortins, the norepinephrine, all of these different components that drive anabolic behavior. Whether you have melanin stimulating hormone, and not even melanin, ACTH, and your adrenaline precursors to DHEA, and then testosterone on one side, or you have melanin concentrating hormone to ghrelin and growth hormone on the other side, right? Which is the 2 things that mainly people talk about with anabolism: testosterone and growth hormone, right? Both of those are driven by, melanin system cues. Nutrition in the cells are driven by melanocortin receptors, and just a wide variety. So I wanted to kind of go into that, and then go into, like drill home the concept that there's no such thing as burning fat. That's why we have a country with the worst health system in the world, with an obesity epidemic that's through the roof. Meanwhile, every single day, you have thousands of brand new platforms talking about they got the secret of fat burning. Everybody got the secret of fat burning. Only thing is, we fat. How is it that we fat? And a person that doesn't pay any attention, the first thing they'll say is, well, the problem is the people. People are lazy, or the people are not investing. They're not spending any money. They're not spending time. But then when you look at the numbers and go, well, actually, we do have $1 trillion supplement, weight loss business. So technically, that's not true. Folks have gym memberships. They're buying the gym memberships. They're buying the Zoom private, like the private, we buying every program possible, and we still fat. The reason being is twofold. The people who are selling these programs are liars. They're liars, right? They're using drugs and surgery to create these bodies, right? And then the people following, they don't understand that they are uninformed being led by misinformed, and the whole concept that they're trying to get down pat doesn't even exist. Calories don't exist in the human body, and neither does burning a calorie exist in the human body. That is not a thing. There's no such thing as burning fat. There's no such thing as burning sugar. So nobody can teach you how to burn fat, because your body does not do that. It's incapable of burning fat unless you're on fire, right? If you're actually in a fire being burned, that's the only way you burn fat, right? Or you get sunburn, or you actually get burned and scarred, like you get hurt. But there's no such thing as like getting a 6-pack from burning fat, or getting that doesn't exist. what you're doing is using carbohydrates and fats as substrates to create electricity. That electricity is stimulating the production of water and recycling of ATP. Now, once you start there, now you can build some real health programs. Now you can get a real health protocol. Now you can really fine tune your body, muscles, exercise, cancer, diet, whatever you're trying to do with yourself. Because now you're in truth. Now you're in truth, right? And now you can look back at even some stuff your ancestors were talking about, your grandma, the Bible, you know, Book of the Dead. Now you can look back at ancient cultures that you personally have respect for and build even a better respect for them, because you can go, oh, wait a minute. So this is why there's so many references to spirit or to the breath, or even, you know, Genesis chapter 2:4-7, or, you know, Khnum, you know, and Shu, the breath of, you know, like, this is why the breath was elevated to a certain level. And this is why they're talking about the breath or the spirit giving life, because the spirit is the breath and the breath does give life, not in a hypothetical, mystical, weird kind of, doing like, like not that, like really the breath is giving life, right? It's giving life, and it creates your consciousness. It creates your mind. Right? It facilitates that, right? And so, it's an interesting time to be alive, where now we have science was once used to debunk those things. Science was once used to debunk those concepts, right? Now I can do this, right? Now I can go to the internet. Yeah, you know what's funny? This is, I say gift and a curse, but for most of my life, the way my mind works is a curse. For the family, now that I have a way to benefit and help others, and, like, use my quote unquote gifts in alignment with what God, what God want me to do, I see it differently. But as a child, yeah, it was different. As a child, it was different. My mind was only really beneficial for nefarious purposes. You know what I'm saying? But I can't sleep if I can't totally figure out a thing. Yeah, I can't sleep. And if I do sleep, I'll be dreaming about figuring that thing out. Like, yeah, like it'll plague me. It'll haunt me. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's just a gift and a curse. But now we can go to the internet and we can get some validation on things. Like one of them being, and this is the YouTube page. Make sure y'all subscribed. Like, we talk about making sure you have your books, making sure you hit the Cash App and the Zelle, or, supporting go to the website, get you some product. But make sure you subscribe. Like, some of y'all ain't even subscribed to the channel. Right? All right. But this thing here, this is important.
Inky prayer number 2. We give thanks and praise to the Most.
This right here is important. Boom. Right? So for some people that don't know what you're looking at right there, that right there is the moment of conception. That right there is the moment that, like, if nothing else, you should realize that we're in a blessed time period, because for thousands of years, we could read and study religious documents, but there was no proof of certain things. Now we know the moment a human sperm fertilizes a human egg, we know that there's light produced at that moment. Light symbolizes life in the most intimate, fragile, special moment of all moments. Like life is introduced. And that's literally what this is showing right here. Right? So, many generations, they couldn't see this. So this is definitely something worth giving praise and thanks for. The ability to even have this type of vision to settle arguments, disputes, and debates. Right? That we can see that. Now, this is obviously an animation, but this right here is a modern miracle that we can see that moment, right? And not only can we see that moment, but now we have, let me see, can y'all say yes? Are y'all on screen with me? Okay. Now we have these things. Let me see. Let's see, at the moment of death, light in cell. Let's see what pops up. Ah, beautiful. You see that? Now, mind you, obviously, Vice is not a journal, like it's not respected, right? But let's go and see if we can find something that, okay, earth.com, right? Earth.com is, right? Now look at this. Israel Hayom, right? So there is religious groups that's getting hip to the science. They getting hip. It's slow, right? It's slow, right? So now we have scientific proof, right? We got physics.org. Now we got scientific proof that at the moment of conception, light is produced. Now that's a living cell. And now that came, I want to say that came about 15 years ago, right? That at the moment of conception, right, light, and we got a whole book on it, on fertility and blah, 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 right? On fertility and all of that stuff, right? God versus sickness, let there be light, right? So we got a whole book on the processes that drive it, how you can maximize it, from the guy that has 10 children, right? If I can't tell you nothing else, I can tell you about making a baby, right? But all of the different facets of that moment, right? Maximizing that moment. All of the nutrients required on both sides, right? For mom and dad in this book, right? But so we got that. And then now fast forward 2024, the research is figuring out 2025, it goes into press. It goes into media that at the moment of death, the cells lose their light. At the moment of death, cells lose their light. So there's no more like, and this is why I had to play that little debate thing. We might review some more debates and stuff like that just to laugh, you know what I'm saying? Or figure out some spaces where we can help, right? But people debating the Quran, which is from, 1,500 years ago, versus the Bible, which is 2,000 years ago, right? What are you doing? What are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not having real growth-driven debates if you don't include in those debates modern science, right? If you don't include in those debates ancient science, right? I'm all for a Bible, Quran, like I'm all for those discussions. But there's a lot of tools that we have at our disposal, old and new, that we can use to either validate or invalidate some of the things that people are discussing. But people that are religious scholars, they have spent their life, it's the same problem like with some of these medical doctors, or it's the credential problem. People have spent their lives, like an Israelite or a Christian scholar, they have spent 10, 20, 30 years just studying the Bible. So when you have a debate with them, one of the rules to the debate is they don't want to have a debate that includes anything outside of the Bible, right? Or if you have a debate with a Muslim, they don't mind including the Bible, but they don't want to go outside the Quran or the Bible, right? Because the Quran is an extension of the Bible, right? It even references. So they don't want to go outside of those two religious books unless you're going to companion books, right? And that's where the problem comes in, right? That's where the problem comes in. So we got science now. Science is validating a lot of these ancient concepts, right? We have the light being produced at the moment of conception and the light going out at the moment of transition, right? Now we got to figure out, now that we have ironclad, now we got to figure out the in-betweens, right? Now we got to really narrow down this concept. We got to go to Kemet. All roads lead to Wakanda. We got to go back to Kemet, because Kemet actually had a pathway that light left the cell and then left the atmosphere and actually fed the star system, which is the reason why the star system feeds us, because this is like a big nursery for new stars, right? So there's a lot of sense. It makes a lot of logic, you know what I'm saying? Because most of our nutrients are born in dying stars, right? And then our day-to-day nutrients comes from our local stuff. So it's a lot of it's a lot of good nuggets to continue to follow and continue to see what we can learn and discover, whatever the case may be. But all of the new scientific discoveries are pointing us back at some ancient concepts. And it shouldn't really be contentious, right? Because another thing you can learn from the timeline starting medical school at 1765, right, is that technically, if we start medical school 1765, we don't know about water and nutrition yet, right? We're just learning those things after we create the medical school, right? We're just learning anatomy after. Technically, we only have 300 years really of studying the human body, right? So it shouldn't really be contentious or surprising that folks that have spent maybe 1,000 years or 2,000 years of studying the human body have made some discoveries that's further along than ours. We only been at it for 300 years. You know what I'm saying? So we might outdo our ancestors in some spaces, but we have to leave the door open that, just on time, right? Time management, right? Just doing the activity longer, getting in more reps, that they developed further, right? Because they had at least 1,000, 1,500 years of documented, what we would consider to be medical study and research. Where we only have 300 years. We only have 300 years. You know what I'm saying? That's a very small window, right? So it only makes sense that some of the things we're discovering now put us back in alignment with the folks that spent 3 to 5 to 10 times as long, studying and creating lineages of information. That's why it's important that, doctors made children that were doctors, or blacksmith made children that were blacksmith, or priest made children that went into the priesthood, right? Not to control the people or caste system or whatever, even though those things played a role, politics and economics, but also for continuity of information, right? Continuity of information, because back at that time, you didn't really have like patents or copyrights in the way that we do today, right? So continuity of information, you passed your intellectual property down to your seed, right? To your babies. They got some through, genetics, and then through environment, exposure, and mouth to ear, you gave them all you could give them. And, you pass down the wisdom that way. You know what I'm saying? And you wrote books and whatever the case may be, but books were more like horizontal gene transfer, right? Mouth to ear is more like vertical, you know what I'm saying? Like books kind of spread out to the masses, or just at least outside of your household, right? Well, listen, it's not even just the papyri of Annie, you know what I'm saying? Because respect to the Kemetic family, a lot of people that try to read, the papyrus of Annie or the Book of the Dead or the Coming Forth by Day, or even the pyramid text, a lot of that stuff is gobbledygook. You know what I'm saying? If you don't have the science intact, you know what I'm saying? So some people will hear like, okay, well, my Quran or my Bible, it comes from these older concepts. And then when they try to go get those things and read them, it makes even less logical sense to them than the Quran or the Bible. And so they never get to read the full book. They put it down, you know what I'm saying? Because they can't make sense of it. You're going from one anthropomorphized God to like 10 or 20 or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it doesn't make sense until you get the science, right? When you add the science part in, all of them begin to make sense. And not only do the Quran, the Bible, and the pyramid texts and the, Coming Forth by Day, Bhagavad Gita and all of these different texts, Upanishads, even, like all of these texts begin to make sense because I've studied and read all of them. You know what I'm saying? They not only start to all make sense, but you also start to notice the connecting threads, right? You notice the connecting threads, and the connecting threads are not in religious ideology. It's not in religious iconography or any of those concepts, because that's where debates come in. Oh, well, this concept, we see that. So yeah, the concept of the woo, Christ and Christ is only important for me, not necessarily in an aha, we did it first sense, but in this is a part of the science of the heart. And we live in a world today where the heart is the number one killer. The heart's the number one killer. So our 300 years of study has not gotten us closer to solving this problem. We need to refer back to some folks that studied this for 1,000, 2,000 years and see what they got and compare some notes, right? And then it becomes interesting where you see like, wait a minute, from Kemet to the church to modern science, you have this one concept. And the one concept centers around the breath, right? And then as you explore the breath, and I've had just my lifetime, I've had opportunity to explore the breath in a lot of different ways, whether it was being in high school, smoking a lot of cigarettes, listening to Redman, smoking a lot of blunts, you know what I'm saying? So from the negative side, or being in martial arts or meditative circles, spending years on that, you know what I'm saying? Spending years on cultivating the science of the breath, religious space, or the scientific space, and understanding respiration and mitochondria and alveoli. And, that helped to be able to relate alveoli to the field of grapes. Maybe, Muslims are promised in heaven, and all these kind of things, right? To be able to connect the dots and understand the gap in language is more of where the gaps come in, right? Science is trying to find answers to nature. The same thing people are doing in religion, right? So once we are able to kind of translate that into the body, right? Body language, then it gets more simplified, right? And you get the message, so there's even on top of spirit and breath, you have a lot of references to light, and God as light, and Allah as the light of the world, and Jesus as the light of the world, and just all of these undeniable phrases that create so much endless debate only because they're divorced from science. Only because they're divorced from science. But if you look at science and you go, science says Big Bang, the Bible says the word. We have mechanical waves. So whether we go with science or we go with the Bible, or, if we go back to the Book of the Dead or the Coming Forth by Day or the Book of Life, right? Different ways to translate the divine utterance. So basically another way of saying the word, right? So there's a total agreement between the church, science, and Kemet on the creation of the universe being mechanical waves. Mechanical waves came first, right? Mechanical waves came first. And we know that mechanical waves can be translated into electromagnetic waves. And so the beauty is that when we analyze the cell, that same process is happening all over and over and over, a bazillion times per second, right? The Big Bang is the little tiny bangs happening a zillion times per second in our body. A zillion. I don't even know. You can't even count the number. A zillion, right? All of the cells are recycling ATP and utilizing ATP, and that's creating little tiny releases of light or electromagnetic waves and mechanical waves at the same time. And that gives birth to the life in the cell, right? And so you have this silent electrical system of filaments, microtubules, and their ability to channel electricity outside of the mitochondria or, the phospholipid membrane of the cell, right? Create little electrical, magnetic, luminous highways inside the cell, going in a variety of different directions that provide the cell with structure, not only structure, a source of power for the enzyme. So all of these concepts, right? All of these concepts you can have in your paper, your midterm, right? All of these concepts, right? Yeah. You said Shabaka Stone. Bro, it's listen, it's not just the Shabaka Stone, bro. It's so many different things. It's so many different things. That's why I said, listen, and I want to turn the whole convo about that. We're going to get back to this midterm. But, I just thought the Iceman 3 with the Drake thing was genius. Because there's so many Bible, once you bring in Pinocchio's father is Joseph. And, when you start talking about Shabaka Stone, the 7 days of creation, you got to go to just all of the things like Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and, you know, the instructions of Amenemhotep and Ptahhotep and, you know, the 7 years of famine, from the famine stele to the dream, you know, like all of this stuff, you know what I'm saying? When the Greeks forced the Kemetic people to write, you know, to create what we know of now, you know, as the original books of the Bible, they didn't have another story. You know, they didn't have another story. So now you got these guys having these debates about what is the Injil, or what is the gospel that Jesus was preaching, right? Because the New Testament is written about Jesus traveling around and teaching the gospel. First thing we have to do, the same thing like the word spirit, we got to turn the word spirit back into breath to make sense out of it. Gospel is another one of those words. Gospel means good news or godly news, right? So the good news or the news of God, right? Where'd that come from, right? This is Kemet. This is Kemet. What were they talking about? What good godly news was they talking about? You know what I'm saying? You already know. You know what I'm saying? Osiris, Isis, and Heru and Horus, right? And not necessarily them in the personification, but the science, which is the reason why the central pieces of Kemetic science, religion, and health was not Isis, you know, Osiris and Horus, or Heru, or Set and Asar, or Wusia. You know, people get hung up on the name thing, right? But they were just characters in the story to communicate the science. So that's where it's important to remember the skin being green, the perfect black with the skin being green. So there's a relationship of pigment, right? That's where the word Nefer is important. Nefer is important because that's the central feature of everything in Kemet, right? Which is the windpipe and the heart, right? The windpipe and the heart. Why? Because the windpipe to the heart, the breath, right? The breath to the heart is what creates the electricity that we know of as our mind, our consciousness, right? And this is the reason why in Kemet you have two different words or names, nouns for the heart. You have the Hati, right? Or you have the Ib, right? The Hati was more associated with the actual flesh organ. The Ib was more associated with the mind, or what we would call our magnetic field, or you know. So when we look at the weighing of the heart is a measure of natural electricity or tribal electricity, right? Which is symbolized by the feather, which even today we know that a feather creates static electricity all by itself, right? So we have the feather of Shu, called the Shut, later on known as the feather of Ma'at, representing electricity, balancing against the heart, which is the organ of magnetism. So even in the weighing of the heart ceremony, it's a matter of electricity and magnetism, right? So that magnetism that we know of as life is facilitated by the breath, which is why Nefer, beauty, is the windpipe going to the heart, right? Because that is what beauty was. The focal point of beauty was how your body embodied, right? Your body embodied the netures, right? The gods, right? But it doesn't make sense if you get into the religious space and not the science space. If you go religion, you're like, yo, so you saying that there was multiple bodies inside one body? You having the same old Christian Trinity argument. So there's three bodies in one body? Like, you know what I'm saying? You're having that argument where if you understand that it's an anthropomorphization, what you're talking about is the fundamental energies that run the universe. And you have them in gradients and categories the same way science does, right? The same way science does. You have the fundamental forces, then you have, you know, atoms and this, that. You had same thing. Same thing. You know what I'm saying? You just had it anthropomorphized. So that way you could create stories, right, to communicate these things easily to babies. And so babies would come up with the understanding, and not just understand like an energy representation, but understand how energies work together, or how different forces work together, or how different natural resources embody certain natural energies. And, you know, so it's just another language to capture the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So when it's talking about the natures living through the body, or even what was called vessels, right? So we call vessels now, you know, our lymphatic vessels, our blood vessels. In Kemet, it was called metu, right? Metu, like the language is Medu, the vessels are metu. So it's a D and a T. Medu refers to the language of the gods, or the words of the gods. And the metu is the vessels of the gods, right? Because your body is the vessel of gods, right? And it channels those energies through the body. So for 2,000 years under Greco-Roman church ideology, we had to listen to how stupid that was. Now, in the last 100 years, we have spent billions of dollars rediscovering how those energies actually regulate the human body, starting with the understanding of, you know, thiamine, B1, vitamin B1 in 1910, right? How carbohydrates are broken down, and, you know, going all the way up to 1961, where we understand the full electron transport chain. You know, now we have this understanding like, wait a minute. So the sun's energy is actually reproduced in our cells every day, right? And the sun is actually communicating with the sun, like, so it really is Ra, or, you know, Atum, or whatever, you know, the sun speaking, communicating. These energies really are driving, you know, the body. You know, stars, we literally eat dead stars every day, you know what I'm saying? And die if we don't. Right? Because iron comes from dead stars. Like, so all of these concepts where in Kemet, it's like, no, the ancestors are the stars, and we have to have communion. We have to eat the flesh of our dead ancestors, the anointed ones, right? Because the anointing was mummification. But the life, the consciousness, the light that we now see, right? Science now that went out in the cell, left the cell via a vehicle and went up to the North Pole via the Aurora Borealis, the stairs made out of light, the Great Stairs, right? Crossed the Duat, which we know of as the barrier, or the magnetosphere, right? Crossed the Duat, you know, out into, you know, the umbilical cord of the sun and the earth, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, it gets a little crazy from there, you know what I'm saying? More complicated, more longer conversations, but basically they had that understanding, right? And so it makes sense when you realize that your mineral elements, you know, pass like water, you know what I'm saying? But all of the minerals you need come from stars. So that's the origin of communion on a surface level. Then on a secondary level, you know, Osiris, you know, and photosynthesis, creating plants or whatever the case may be. So we're just learning about this whole energy thing. We're just learning that the human body runs on these energies, period. We didn't even have an understanding until, you know, Copenhagen, when Schrodinger and all them guys start figuring some stuff out. You know what I'm saying? And figuring out that they couldn't figure stuff out. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's where spooky action at a distance and quantum entanglement and all of those concepts get refined, right? J.J. Thomson, you know, he's the early pioneer with photon, electron stuff that later on Richard Feynman, you know, quantum electrodynamics, and we get the 1/137 or the inverse, the 137, the Feynman structure constant, and all of those concepts, right, come from the relationship of photons to electrons, right? But that's what's happening in our cells. So for me, I'm just studying all these things to figure out my relation to the things. That's why I think science in school is boring, because you are not in the classwork. They teach you about the earth, the moon, the stars, all kinds of crazy stuff in school, but it's never in like you centric. So for me, science was fun, always hobby type, like I enjoy it, but only when I'm at the center of my study. So when I'm studying ancient science, religious science, modern science, whatever, I'm just trying to see what applies to what's going on with me. You know what I'm saying? What can I grab and use today? You know what I'm saying? And so as you go through and you get all of these different, you start to say, oh, okay, I get it. The chakras is fake. I get it. They was trying to create a system where you could learn you first, like kindergarten. Light is produced in the human body. So let's think about this. Let's meditate on this, right? Let's learn this, so that later on, as you ascend through the studies, as you ascend through the degrees, and you eventually learn the structures of the inner workings of the body, you can understand these luminous concepts. So then when you get to graduate stage, or you go from novice to adept, and then they start giving you things like ayahuasca and mushrooms and all of these things to enhance your meditative or spiritual journey, you would have some pretext for what you're looking at, as opposed to just, it's comedy. Oh, I had some mushrooms and I tripped. Everything was so bright and colorful. It was amazing. Oh, I think I was out of body. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, it's not the out of body experience. You just had a micro version of your inner universe. And your inner universe very much reflects your outer verse, right? Because nature is patterned in a fractal kind of way. So what's on a small level reflects each level. The geometry is the same. But you just went on an inner journey. That's why they call meditation going within, right? You're not getting a plant or an entheogen to help you go within and fly over your neighborhood. Like, that's not what that's for. It may seem like that, because that means you don't have control over your experience yet. You know what I'm saying? When you get control over your experience, then you get more of a, but that's what that was for. Right. So back to the book, right? Back to the book. We started going all over the place, right? Hopefully we got something. All right. So back to the book, back to the numbers. Right? How did we go crazy? How did we go out? I see how we went crazy. This is my boo-boo right here. This is my boo-boo right here. Yeah, this whole little time, this whole little number 12. You know what I'm saying? Because not only do you have the 12 proton chambers that's rotating the ATPase turbine, but the 3 branches are at 120 degrees from each other. You know what I'm saying? So that 12 is crazy. You got the 12 protons operating the 3 at 120 degrees from each other, right? And that's coming from what? The 5 cytochromes. You know what I'm saying? The 4 complexes with the 3. So yeah. Anyway, so I get romantic. and halfway poetic. Well, when we get to that 3, 4, 5, and the 12, and the 60, and y'all know what it is, right? But it's just beautiful how that math is present, at the macro scale and the micro scale, right? That's how time and space is unified, which is the reason why math, like music, because math is the theoretical side of music. Math and music is really like the same thing almost. Music is the feel of it, the realization of math. Math is more the theoretical, the analytical side to understanding. But 3, 4, 5, 12, 60, 72. You know what I'm saying? Those numbers is amazing how it regulates our universe. It gives us a blueprint, a compass to understand our universe and our inner micro. You know what I'm saying? Kind of epic. All right. So let's make sure that we finish this up. We got to cook. Right? We got to cook. So we talked about yesterday NAD, FAD. So we ain't gonna review. We're not gonna go through that. Just watch the other videos, right? Watch the other videos, right? When we go 100 grams of fat, 900 kcals, right? And then I think, what did we say? 3.7 million joules, right? Right? Same 100 grams of fat. All right, so maybe I should, just so that nobody gets confused, take the NAD off, right? But then also translate that to somewhere around 11,500 ATP. Right, somewhere around 11,500 ATP. Right. And then be able to translate that to roughly 8,000 water molecules. Right? 8,000 water molecules. Right? This just, for John Q. Public trying to lose 10 pounds or, whatever, this might be definitely like overkill. This is definitely like trying to swat a fly with like a rocket launcher. You know what I'm saying? But for what we're doing, right? For what we're doing, we just want to make sure that we have the concept down pat, right? The concept down pat, right? And so this is going to translate over here, right? So 500 liters of oxygen. 500 liters of oxygen, right? 500 liters of oxygen. We're talking about inspiration, right? Respiration, the breath, right? And we're talking about exercise being able to direct that oxygen to specific tissues, right? And translate that. See, martial arts took it further because martial arts took it to the internal, right? To the actual internal organs, right? And maybe in the future space, we might have to go there, even though we kind of have some books that already do that, right? We have the Clean Abs Fascia book. We have the Blueprint That Builds Itself book, right? Which you Where's that book at? Somewhere around here. The Blueprint That Builds Itself. Right? If you don't have those books, you need to get those books. The Blueprint That Builds Itself. Right? But exercise allows you to direct this oxygen to specific tissues. Right? So if you're working your quads or your hamstrings or this or that, and this is why, the glymphatic system book, the memory bank book, we do a good deal of laying that kind of relationship out for you there, right? Because exercise drives the lymphatic system, right? We know that. Like you can look that up anywhere, right? Your lymphatic system doesn't have a pump, doesn't have a heart. So exercise is what moves the lymph, right? What they leave out is the middleman. Right? So you talk about exercise, which is skeletal muscle. Then they talk about the lymphatic system or the lymph fluid, which moves through lymph vessels. What they don't tell you is that happens because the skeletal muscle is carried by fascia, and so are the lymphatic vessels. So when you contract and relax the skeletal muscle, you're contracting and relaxing the fascia. When you contract and relax the fascia, two things happens. You get the production of electricity, right? And you also get the pumping of the lymphatic system, right? Now, on a secondary level, remember that your organs are also attached to that same fascia. So the same fascia or fascia, right? Tomato, tomato. When you move the skeletal muscle and you move that fascia, that fascia, that translates to the organs and tissues in that area, and then also to the lymphatic vessels of that area, right? Which is why push-ups directly translates into heart benefit, right? Because push-ups is working the upper arms, right? The shoulders and the pectoral muscles. So when you're working the upper arms and the pectoral muscles, you're directly doing this to the fascia attached underneath these muscles. As you're doing that, right? You're tugging and pulling on the lymphatic vessels, right? And so those lymphatic vessels clean the organs in that area. But not only that, you have electrical production because the fascia is piezoelectric. The fascia is piezoelectric. And so those are the feathers on the other side of that way into the heart, right? Is the fascia. The fascia, and this to me, which is probably one of the most miraculous things about Kemet, right? And so let me show y'all. This was one of the things that set my soul on fire. This is how Shu became my favorite. I was like, oh my God, Shu is the GOAT, right? Shu is the GOAT. You know what I'm saying? I was like, oh my God, the God Shu is everything we're missing in science, right? So let me show you what I'm saying. All right, so let's go here. All right, do we got y'all? Y'all see what I'm looking up? Okay, boo. So we go over here and we type in proteoglycan. Bam. Right, and now we get to see what they was talking about in Kemet with the feathers. Right, look at this here. Proteoglycans. These is little feathers. This is what your fascia is made out of. Little feathers. Look at these things. Little feathers. Crazy. Crazy. Yeah, this is what your fascia is made out of. These little feathers. Right? This is what human feathers look like. And inside these little sulfur. This is another reason why sulfur is important for your immune system. This is where little negative ions get stored up. Negative ions get stored up in here, right? So it helps to electrify and keep a certain type of currency in the tissues. In the tissues. This is where it becomes super important to understand that the fascia is piezoelectric, right? So in modern science, the feather of shoe is called a proteoglycan, right? Crazy, crazy, crazy work. And so if we're talking about the heart, let me see what we got here. Okay, look at this. You see this picture here? Man, they ain't gonna let us get it. Hold up, we're gonna get another one. We're gonna get another one. Cause this right here is a good one. Can you see that big? Do y'all see that? Okay, good. That's kind of good enough. Or maybe let me grab it and then do it like this. Yeah, let me grab it and make it big like that. Pause. That might have sounded a little crazy. Ooh. See that? So the heart is inside this fascia. All of this tissue right here that you see, all of this is fascia. All of this is fascia. The heart is wrapped up, right? The heart is already wrapped up, right? That's what this is. All that's fascia, right? So anything that works on that, right, is translating electrical, it's electrical translation directly to the heart. So when you're working on the chest, whether you're doing bench presses or push-ups, you're stimulating this fascia up here. You're stimulating the lungs. You're stimulating the lymphatic system and vessels all up around in here. Right? So, okay, here you go, over here. All of this tissue here. All of this tissue here. Right? So, yeah, it might make sense. Now we go back. Right? Here's the see, here's the pericardium. You see, with the heart is wrapped up in. Right? Here's the pericardium what the heart is wrapped up in. And so in between the heart and the pericardium is another type of water. Remember I was saying that the waters have to be conditioned with different types of mineral elements for specific electrical activity. So the pericardium is a bag that the heart is in. The pericardium is directly tied to the fascia and all that. So when you're doing push-ups, right, those push-ups directly acting on the pericardium. The pericardium, amongst other things, is cleaning the heart every time you do them push-ups. It's helping the heart not to become fibrous. It's helping the heart to stay flexible, elastic, and all kinds of other little benefits. Right? So, and then we can go even crazier. Hold on, let me pull this out. Let's see if y'all can see this. Oh man. All right, we might have to have another one of these. We might have to have another one of these reviews.
This is why you have to go to Amazon and get the book, Rich Abs, Poor Abs, now.